I was signing the final paperwork for my first home when my phone exploded with messages. My hands trembled as I read the court summons. My own parents were suing me for theft, not money theft. They claimed I stole my younger sister Emma's future by refusing to give them my down payment. After 12 years of working myself to exhaustion, never taking a penny from them, somehow I owed them everything I'd earned because Emma wanted to attend an expensive art school. The pen slipped from my fingers as memories crashed over me like waves against a crumbling shore. 16 years old, standing in the manager's office at Paulson's Grocery, my first job interview. My parents, Brad and Diane, had made it crystal clear that morning that if I wanted anything beyond basic food and shelter, I'd need to earn it myself. Emma has real talent, my mother had said, adjusting Emma's new ballet shoes. We need to invest in her future. You're smart, Annika. You'll figure things out. Emma was 12, then already enrolled in private dance classes that cost more than our monthly groceries. I'd watched my parents drain their checking account for her summer art camp while telling me the $20 school field trip was too expensive. Mr. Paulson hired me that afternoon. 3-hour shifts after school, 8-hour days on weekends. I learned to stock shelves with geometric precision, memorize produce codes, and smile even when customers screamed about expired coupons. My grades never slipped. Honors chemistry at 7 in the morning, calculus until 3:30, then racing to work, still solving equations in my head while scanning groceries. You missed Emma's recital, my father would say, not looking up from his newspaper. Family comes first. But family, I learned, had a very specific definition in our house. Family meant Emma. Family meant sacrificing everything for her opportunities. Family meant my exhaustion was less important than her comfort. By 17, I'd saved enough for my own laptop bought secondhand from a college student. My parents questioned why I needed it when Emma could use a new easel. I started picking up extra shifts, working until 11 on school nights, running on 4 hours of sleep and pure determination. One Thursday evening, I came home to find my mother in my room holding papers I didn't recognize. My heart stopped. Credit card statements, 3 of them, all in my name. What are these? My voice barely carried across the room. She didn't even flinch. Emma needed supplies for her advanced art class. We knew you'd want to help your sister. You're building credit anyway. $8,000. They'd opened cards in my name and charged $8,000 for paintbrushes and canvas and classes I'd never agreed to fund. My savings meant for college applications and SAT prep suddenly seemed meaningless against this mountain of debt I hadn't created. I stared at the woman who gave birth to me, searching for remorse, for acknowledgement, for anything resembling maternal concern. Instead, she patted my shoulder like I was a skittish animal. Don't be so dramatic. We'll handle the minimum payments. Family helps family. But I knew the truth in that moment. I wasn't family. I was a resource to be mined, a well to be drained, a bridge to be burned in service of Emma's dreams. The credit cards weren't a mistake or a desperate measure. They were a declaration of my worth in their eyes, spelled out in interest rates and fraud. I spent that night researching identity theft laws and credit repair strategies. By dawn, I'd filed reports with all 3 credit bureaus and documented everything. I couldn't press charges, not while living under their roof, but I could protect myself from further damage. My manager noticed the bags under my eyes the next day. Mrs. Chen, the assistant manager, quietly pulled me aside during break. "You okay, sweetheart? You've been looking worn down lately." I almost broke, then almost spilled everything to this woman who showed more concern in 5 seconds than my parents had in years. Instead, I straightened my spine and forced a smile. "Just college prep, you know how it is." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "If you need more hours, let me know. Good kids like you deserve every chance to succeed." More hours meant more money. More money meant faster escape. I took every shift they offered, learning to function on caffeine and willpower, watching my bank balance grow, digit by digit, while my parents remained oblivious to my plans. Emma flourished in her classes, painting masterpieces and dancing like she was born to it. I didn't begrudge her the talent or even the opportunities. What cut deepest was her ignorance of the cost. She'd bounce into my room after midnight, chattering about color theory while I struggled to stay awake over economics homework, never questioning why her sister looked so tired, why I was never home anymore, why our parents smiled at her and frowned at me. "You should come see my exhibition next week," she said one night, perched on my bed like a sparrow. "Mom says you're always too busy, but it would mean everything if you came." I looked at my little sister, so bright and unaware, and made a choice that would define the rest of my life. I wouldn't tell her the truth, wouldn't shatter her illusions about our parents or her place in the world, but I also wouldn't sacrifice my future for her comfort anymore. "I'll try," I said, knowing I'd be working a double shift that day. "But Emma, you should know that not everyone can drop everything for your events. People have responsibilities." She tilted her head, confused by the concept of obligations that trumped her performances. "But you're my sister. That's what family does." The words echoed our parents so perfectly I had to turn away. Family. Such a simple word that had been twisted into a weapon against me, a chain meant to bind me to their expectations. As she skipped out of my room, humming a tune from her latest dance routine, I opened my laptop and started researching colleges far from home. The credit cards would complicate financial aid, but I'd figure it out. I always did. That's what you do when you learn at 16 that the only person who'll save you is yourself. State University acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. My hands shook as I read it in the grocery store break room, tears blurring the words, "full academic scholarship," until Mrs. Chen gently took the paper from my hands. "Oh, honey," she whispered, pulling me into the kind of hug my mother hadn't given in years. "You did it." 4 years of tuition covered. Room and board were my responsibility, along with books, fees, and everything else. But it was hope, tangible and real, printed on official letterhead. I'd hidden the applications from my parents, used the school counselor's address for correspondence, paid every fee from my carefully guarded savings. "Where is this place?" my father asked that night, barely glancing at my acceptance letter before returning to Emma's latest report card. "Seems far." 3 hours north, I said carefully, "but the economics program is excellent." Economics. My mother's nose wrinkled. Sounds boring. Emma's teacher thinks she could get into the Rhode Island School of Design. Imagine our daughter at such a prestigious art school. Our daughter, singular. The message couldn't have been clearer if they'd written it in neon. I moved into the smallest dorm room on campus that August, everything I owned, fitting in 2 suitcases and a backpack. My roommate Sarah had matching bedding and decorative pillows. I had sheets from the clearance rack and a pillow I'd owned since middle school. "Your parents couldn't help you move in?" Sarah asked, watching me struggle with a box of textbooks I'd bought used. "They were busy," I said, which was technically true. Emma had an intensive workshop that weekend. Apparently driving their eldest to college ranked below watching their youngest paint. 3 jobs materialized within my first week. Cafeteria morning shift starting at 5:30, library desk in the afternoon's weekend cleaning crew for the science buildings. My schedule was color-coded down to 15-minute increments classes, in blue work and red study time in green. Sleep when it happened, didn't get a color. "You're insane," Sarah announced after watching me stumble in at midnight for the 3rd consecutive Tuesday. "Nobody needs to work this much." But she had parents who called every Sunday, sent care packages, deposited money for textbooks without being asked. She couldn't fathom parents who'd steal your identity before they'd support your education. Ramen became my primary food group, 5 for $1 at the shop 6 blocks from campus. I learned to doctor them with eggs when protein was necessary, frozen vegetables when I could afford them. The cafeteria job included 1 free meal per shift, and I made it count, loading my plate during breakfast service with enough calories to sustain the 16-hour days ahead. My accounting professor, Dr. Martinez, noticed me nodding off during a particularly complex lecture on tax codes. She asked me to stay after class, and I braced for academic consequences I couldn't afford. "When's the last time you got 8 hours of sleep?" she asked, instead her voice gentle. "I'm fine," I managed. "Just a busy week." "Annika, you're one of my brightest students, but you're burning yourself out. What's going on?" Something in her tone, maternal and genuinely concerned, cracked my carefully constructed walls. I told her about the jobs, the expenses, the need to graduate debt-free because my credit was already compromised through no fault of my own. She listened without interrupting, then pulled out a business card. My husband's firm needs a part-time bookkeeping assistant, pays 3 times what you're making at those campus jobs combined. Hours are flexible around your classes. I stared at the card like it might disappear. Why would you help me? Because I was you 25 years ago. Sometimes we need someone to see our struggle and offer a ladder instead of judgment. The bookkeeping job changed everything. 15 hours a week at a real wage meant I could quit the cleaning crew, reduce cafeteria shifts, actually sleep occasionally. My grades improved from B's to A's, and Dr. Martinez became my unofficial mentor, teaching me about financial planning beyond textbook theories. Investment in yourself pays the highest dividends, she'd say during our monthly coffee meetings. Remember that when people try to guilt you into spending your resources elsewhere. Her timing was prophetic. My parents started calling more frequently as sophomore year progressed, always with the same refrain. Emma's been accepted to a pre-college program at the Art Institute. My mother gushed during one October call. It's expensive, but so worth it. We were hoping you could contribute maybe $500 a month. I'm eating ramen for dinner again tonight, I said, stirring the noodles with a plastic fork. I don't have $500 to spare. Don't be selfish, Annika, she's your sister. The line went dead before I could respond. They'd call again in a few weeks with another request, another opportunity for Emma that required my sacrifice. I stopped answering on the first ring, then stopped answering altogether unless absolutely necessary. Thanksgiving arrived with an expectation that I'd come home. Bus tickets cost money I'd allocated for winter boots, but I made the journey anyway, hoping to see Emma if nothing else. I walked into a house transformed, new furniture in the living room, pristine hardwood floors, where carpet used to be a kitchen that looked lifted from a magazine. Renovations, my father said proudly. The house needed updating. But you said you couldn't help with my textbooks because money was tight. That's different, my mother interjected. This is an investment in our home's value. Emma appeared then wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, chattering about her upcoming showcase. She'd grown taller, more polished, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned their worth or worried about their next meal. Annika, Mom said you might not come because of work or something. I'm so glad you're here. Her hug was genuine, warm, uncomplicated. She didn't know about the credit cards, the sleepless nights, the ramen dinners that funded her dreams. Part of me wanted to tell her everything to shatter the illusion our parents had crafted. But looking at her bright smile, I chose silence again. She was 16 now, the same age I'd been when I started working. But her 16 looked nothing like mine. Dinner was awkward, filled with stories of Emma's achievements and pointed questions about my little job at school. When I mentioned making the dean's list, my mother changed the subject to Emma's latest commission. When I talked about my accounting courses, my father yawned and asked Emma about her college preferences. We're thinking she should apply early decision to RISD, he announced. With her talent, she's sure to get in. The tuition is steep, but we'll figure it out as a family. As a family. The words sat like lead in my stomach. I excused myself early, claiming exhaustion from the bus ride. Emma knocked on my door later that night. Are you okay? You seem sad at dinner. Just tired, I said, the familiar lie rolling off my tongue. Mom and Dad mean well, she offered. They just get excited about my art stuff. They're proud of you too, you know. I looked at my little sister, so earnest in her belief that our parents loved us equally, and felt the chasm between our realities widen. She lived in a world where parents sacrificed for their children's dreams. I lived in one where I was expected to sacrifice for hers. Get some sleep, I said gently. Big day tomorrow with your showcase. I left before dawn, catching the earliest bus back to campus. My parents texted their disappointment at missing breakfast together. I deleted the messages and went to work my cafeteria shift, finding more warmth in Mrs. Johnson's greeting than I'd felt in my childhood home. The rest of sophomore year blurred together in a haze of work and study. I learned to compartmentalize family drama, focusing on my grades and bank balance with single-minded determination. Friends invited me to parties, spring break trips, normal college experiences. I declined politely, calculating how many hours each activity would cost me. "You're missing out on the best years of your life," Sarah warned one Friday night, dressed for a date, while I prepared for another weekend shift. But she was wrong. These weren't meant to be my best years. These were my building years, my foundation years, my prove everyone wrong years. The best years would come later, when I stood on ground I'd paid for with my own hands. My phone rang as I walked to work. Unknown number, but local to my hometown. I almost didn't answer, then worried it might be an emergency. "Is this Annika Brennan?" The voice was professional, clipped. "Yes. This is collections department at First National. You're 3 months behind on your credit card payment. We need to discuss your account immediately." My blood ran cold. The credit cards my parents had opened, the ones they'd promised to handle. There must be a mistake. I've been monitoring my credit. Those accounts were flagged as fraudulent 2 years ago. "Our records show you as the primary account holder. The balance is now over $12,000 with interest and fees. When can we expect payment?" I hung up and ran to the library, logging into my credit report with shaking fingers. There they were, zombie accounts risen from the dead, destroying the credit score I'd fought to rebuild. My parents hadn't just stolen my identity once. They'd done it again, using my information they'd kept betting I wouldn't prosecute family. Dr. Martinez found me there an hour later, surrounded by printed credit reports and legal websites, trying not to hyperventilate. "Talk to me," she commanded, sitting beside me on the floor. So I did. Everything. The first theft, the ongoing requests for money, the renovation I'd seen at Thanksgiving, funded while I ate instant noodles, and now this second betrayal that could derail my entire future. She was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then she pulled out her phone and called her husband. "David, I need you to connect me with Jennifer Walsh. Yes, the attorney. I have a student who needs help." "I can't afford a lawyer," I whispered. "You can't afford not to have one," she countered. "This ends now, Annika. They've stolen enough from you." But even as I nodded, even as I accepted the attorney's business card and scheduled the consultation, I knew the theft went beyond money. They'd stolen my security, my trust, my belief that parents naturally want their children to succeed. They'd stolen my college experience, turning it into a desperate race against financial ruin. They'd tried to steal my future, that I decided was the one thing I wouldn't let them have. The stage lights were blinding, but I didn't need to see the audience to know what I wouldn't find there. 3 empty seats and row G tickets I'd naively sent home with a handwritten note, "I did it. Hope you can come. Annika Marie Brennan, Bachelor of Science in Accounting, summa cum laude." Dean Williams beamed as she handed me my diploma, whispering, "Exceptional work, Miss Brennan. Your professors speak highly of you." The leather folder felt heavier than its physical weight suggested. 4 years condensed into a single document, proof that exhaustion could be transformed into achievement. My phone had been silent all morning. No congratulations, no apologies for missing the ceremony, no acknowledgement that their eldest daughter had just accomplished something extraordinary. Sarah hugged me afterward, her parents snapping photos like I was their own child. "You should be so proud," her mother gushed. "Working your way through school, top of your class. Your parents must be over the moon." They had a prior commitment. I managed the lie easier than explaining that Emma's weekend intensive at a Manhattan art studio trumped my college graduation. Dr. Martinez appeared with her husband David, the attorney who'd helped me navigate the credit card nightmare 2 years prior. They'd become my unofficial family, celebrating my victories and supporting me through battles that shouldn't have been mine to fight. "We have news," David said, pulling me aside after pictures. "The fraud case is officially closed. Your credit is clear and the documentation is sealed. Those accounts can never hurt you again." "What about criminal charges?" He shook his head gently. "You chose not to pursue them. Remember, to protect Emma from the fallout?" I remembered. Another sacrifice at the altar of family peace. The attorney had warned me that prosecution would be public, messy, potentially devastating to my sister's college applications. So I'd accepted the civil resolution, the cleared credit report, the legal documentation that would protect me going forward. My parents never knew how close they'd come to handcuffs instead of a cease and desist letter. "There's more," Dr. Martinez interjected. "David's firm has an opening, entry-level accounting position, but with your credentials, you'd move up quickly." My throat tightened. "You've already done so much." "We've done what any decent people would do for someone who's worked as hard as you have," she corrected. "The job is yours if you want it. Starting salary is $70,000. $70,000. The number rolled around my mind like a foreign language. After years of calculating whether I could afford a $2 coffee, suddenly I was looking at financial stability. Real stability, not dependent on anyone else's promises or manipulation. "When do I start?" They laughed, and Sarah's father insisted on taking everyone to dinner to celebrate. Over pasta I didn't have to budget for, and wine I'd never learned to appreciate. I felt the first glimpses of who I might become without poverty nipping at my heels. My phone buzzed as dessert arrived. "Emma, heard you graduated today. Mom said they told you about my workshop acceptance. Maybe now that you'll have a real job, you can help." I stared at the message, noting what was missing. No congratulations, no acknowledgement of my achievement. Just another hand extended for money I hadn't even earned yet. I turned my phone face down and enjoyed my tiramisu. The move to Cincinnati for the job happened fast. One suitcase had become 3, though my possessions still fit in Sarah's car for the drive to my new life. The studio apartment was tiny, but mine, with a lease only my name on it and locks my parents didn't have keys to. "This is depressing," Sarah announced, surveying the empty space. "You need furniture." "I need a bed and a desk," I corrected. "Everything else can wait." She rolled her eyes but helped me assemble the cheapest bed frame we could find, understanding that luxury wasn't my priority. Security was. Every dollar not spent was a dollar saved a step closer to something I couldn't quite name yet, but felt building in my bones. Work was everything Dr. Martinez had promised. Davidson and Associates specialized in financial planning for small businesses, and they treated their employees like assets rather than expenses. My supervisor, Janet, was brilliant and patient, teaching me practical applications for all those theoretical concepts I'd memorized. "You catch on fast," she noted after my first month. "Most new grads take 6 months to reach where you are already." "I've had good teachers," I said, thinking of Dr. Martinez, but also Mrs. Chen from the grocery store, Mrs. Johnson from the cafeteria, all the women who'd shown me kindness when my own mother couldn't be bothered. The paychecks felt surreal. After taxes and retirement contributions, I still had more monthly income than I'd grossed annually during college. I maintained my Spartan lifestyle banking, 70% of each check watching the numbers climb, with something between disbelief and fierce pride. 3 months into the job, my parents finally called. "We heard you're working at some firm," my mother began without preamble. "Emma's been accepted to RISD, early admission. We're so proud." I waited for the ask. It didn't take long. "The first year is $90,000 with room and board. We've scraped together 30, but we're hoping family can help with the rest. You must be making good money now." $60,000. I let the number sit between us. "You're asking me for $60,000. "Not all at once," my father chimed in clearly on speaker. "Maybe 20 per year. You don't have any real expenses, and Emma's opportunity?" "I have expenses," I interrupted. "Rent, food, transportation, student loans from the credit cards you fraudulently opened in my name." Silence. Then my mother's voice harder now. "We're not going to rehash old misunderstandings. This is about Emma's future." "What about my future?" "You already have a job. Emma needs this chance. Don't be selfish, Annika." The word selfish echoed through my empty apartment. Selfish for working since 16. Selfish for paying my own way. Selfish for not handing over money I'd barely started earning to fund someone else's dreams. "I need to think about it." I lied, knowing the answer, but buying time to process the audacity. Don't think too long. Deposits are due soon. Family helps family remember. They hung up without saying goodbye, let alone congratulations on the job they'd only just learned about. Emma texted that night. A photo of her acceptance letter, followed by streams of heart emojis and exclamation points. Then, Mom says you might help with tuition. You're the best sister ever. I wondered what story they'd told her, that I'd volunteered, that I'd eagerly offered to sacrifice my financial stability for her art school dreams, or had they simply assumed my compliance and told her it was handled? Congratulations on wrist, I typed back. Have you looked into scholarships? Mom says I don't need to worry about that stuff. Family takes care of family. There it was again. The phrase that had haunted my adolescence twisted now into an expectation that I'd perpetually fund Emma's life while receiving nothing in return, not even acknowledgement of my own accomplishments. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app and looked at my growing savings. Each dollar represented an hour worked a meal, skipped a sacrifice made. The thought of handing it over to the people who'd stolen my identity felt like volunteering for robbery. Janet noticed my distraction at work the next day. Everything okay? You seem off. Family stuff, I said vaguely. She laughed, but not unkindly. The hardest part about financial success is suddenly everyone expects you to fund their dreams. Stay strong. Your money, your choice. Her casual understanding hit deeper than she knew. I'd been so isolated in my experience, I'd never considered others face similar pressures. 2 weeks passed. The calls increased. Daily voicemails from my mother, each more accusatory than the last. Messages from my father about disappointment and family obligations. Even extended relatives began reaching out, clearly recruited to the cause. Your cousin Marie says you're refusing to help Emma, my Aunt Patricia texted. That can't be true. You were always such a good girl. Good girl. Code for compliant selfless to the point of self-destruction, willing to light myself on fire to keep others warm. I'd been a good girl at 16, working myself sick while my parents spent money on Emma. I'd been a good girl in college, staying silent about the fraud to protect family peace. But good girls, I was learning, often ended up exhausted and alone, while everyone else thrived on their sacrifices. The breaking point came through Emma herself. She called on a Thursday evening voice trembling. Annika, I don't understand. Mom and Dad said you promised to pay for my school, but now you're backing out. How could you do this to me? Emma, I never promised anything. They asked me 2 weeks ago, and I said I'd think about it. They told me it was handled. I already told all my friends. I turned down other schools because RESD was my dream, and you were making it possible. Now what am I supposed to do? Her pain was real, but it wasn't my creation. Our parents had built this house of cards, promising money they didn't have from someone who'd never agreed to give it. Have you applied for financial aid scholarships, work-study programs? Why should I have to when you have the money, God, Annika? When did you become so selfish? This is my future we're talking about. And what about my future? The words exploded out of me. What about the jobs I've worked since I was 16? The nights I went hungry so I could save for textbooks, the credit cards they opened in my name to pay for your opportunities. When does my future matter? Emma. What credit cards? The silence stretched between us. She genuinely didn't know. Of course she didn't. They'd protected her from the ugly truth while making me the villain of the story. Ask Mom and Dad about the credit cards, I said quietly. Ask them why I had to hire a lawyer in college. Ask them where the money for your dance classes and art camps really came from. Then we can talk about who's being selfish. I hung up before she could respond. My hands shook as I set the phone aside, knowing I'd just lit a fuse that would explode through my family. But maybe it was time. Maybe protecting Emma had enabled our parents to continue their toxic patterns. The next morning, I woke to 37 missed calls. I deleted the voicemails without listening and went to work. Janet took one look at my face and handed me the biggest client file on her desk. Sometimes the best therapy is burying yourself in spreadsheets, she said wisely. By evening, Emma had texted again, a simple message that changed everything. I found the credit reports in Dad's office. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But apologies I was learning didn't pay back stolen years or repair damaged trust. They didn't erase the nights I'd cried myself to sleep hungry and exhausted while funding her childhood dreams. They were just words, and I'd learned long ago that in my family, words meant nothing compared to actions. My parents never apologized. They simply pivoted to anger, spreading their version of events to anyone who'd listen. Their eldest daughter, they claimed, had abandoned family values for money, had turned her back on her sister out of jealousy and spite. But I knew the truth. I hadn't abandoned family values. I'd finally recognized that in their definition of family, I was never truly included. I was the resource, not the recipient. The giver, never the given to. And recognizing that wasn't selfish. It was survival. 5 years. 1,825 days of watching my savings account grow from 3 digits to 4, then steadily climbing toward 5. Each deposit was a small victory, proof that I could build something from nothing, that discipline could triumph over dysfunction. My promotion to senior accountant came with a substantial raise and a private office with a window overlooking downtown Cincinnati. I'd earned it through 60-hour weeks and a willingness to tackle the complex accounts others avoided. My apartment had evolved too, from empty studio to a furnished 1-bedroom in a better neighborhood, though I still lived well below my means. You could afford so much more, my colleague Rachel observed during lunch, scrolling through vacation photos on her phone. When's the last time you took a real trip? I'm saving for something, I said, the same response I'd given for years. Retirement's 40 years away. She laughed. Live a little. But she didn't understand. The something I was saving for wasn't abstract or distant. It was concrete and foundational in the most literal sense. Every month I studied real estate listings, attended open houses on weekends, learned about interest rates and property taxes, with the same intensity I'd once memorized accounting principles. The dream had taken shape slowly. A house. My own house. A place where no one could steal my identity, demand my money, or make me feel like an unwelcome guest in my own life. Sometimes I'd lie awake imagining it a kitchen where I'd never go hungry, a bedroom where I could sleep without fear of the next financial crisis, a door I could lock against anyone who'd tried to drain me dry. My phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. Emma. We'd spoken sporadically since the credit card revelation 3 years ago. She'd attended state school on academic scholarships, apparently motivated by necessity to excel in ways privilege had never inspired. Our conversations were careful, testing boundaries like frost on fragile glass. I graduate next month, she said without preamble. Art education degree, I wanted you to know. That's wonderful, Emma. Congratulations. I'm going to teach in underserved communities, kids who might not otherwise get art programs. She paused. I've been thinking a lot about access and opportunity, about who gets them and who pays for them. The subtext wasn't subtle. She'd grown up these past years, developed awareness our parents had tried to shield her from. We talked for an hour, the longest conversation we'd had since childhood. She told me about her student teaching her boyfriend, Marcus, who worked construction, her tiny apartment shared with 3 roommates. Mom and Dad hate everything about my life, she admitted. They wanted me at RISD making connections with wealthy patrons, becoming the artist they envisioned. Instead, I'm going to teach finger painting to 6-year-olds in Title I schools. And you're happy. I'm useful, she said, and I heard myself in her voice. I'm building something meaningful, even if they can't see it. We hung up with promises to stay in touch, and for the first time, I believed we might. She was finding her own way separate from our parents' toxic expectations. Maybe there was hope for sisterhood after all, built on mutual understanding, rather than obligatory sacrifice. The next morning, I met with Michelle, my real estate agent. She'd been patient with my specific requirements, reasonable commute, solid neighborhood within budget, but below my maximum approval amount. After 2 years of searching, she called with barely contained excitement. "I found it," she announced. "It's perfect for you. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, updated kitchen, great bones. The sellers are motivated. Military transfer, need to close quickly." We toured it that afternoon. A 1960s colonial on a quiet street with mature trees and a small backyard, perfect for reading on summer evenings. The kitchen had been renovated recently, granite countertops, and stainless appliances that seemed impossibly luxurious after years of apartment living. But it was the second bedroom that sold me flooded with morning light, perfect for a home office where I could build my consulting practice. "I want to make an offer," I said, surprising myself with the certainty. Michelle grinned. "I had a feeling. Let's write it up." The sellers accepted within hours, 30-day close contingent on inspection. I'd done everything right, 20% down payment, saved excellent credit score, rebuilt from the ashes of fraud, pre-approval letter in hand. Yet my hand still trembled as I signed the purchase agreement. That evening, I called Dr. Martinez. She'd retired the previous year, but remained my mentor, my chosen mother figure, who'd shown me what support actually looked like. "I'm buying a house," I blurted out as soon as she answered. Her whoop of joy made me laugh. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. Tell me everything." I described the house, the neighborhood, the light in that second bedroom. She listened with the enthusiasm my own mother had never shown for my achievements. "When do you close?" 30 days, July 15th. "Perfect. I'll bring champagne. This deserves proper celebration." Her unconditional joy made the moment real. I was buying a house. Me, the girl who'd survived on ramen and determination, was putting down roots in soil no one could poison. The inspection went smoothly. A few minor issues easily negotiated with sellers eager to move. I spent evenings at the house measuring rooms, imagining furniture placement, picturing a life of stability I'd craved since 16. Sometimes I'd sit on the front steps, key in hand, marveling that this would soon be mine. Word traveled as it always did in families that confused gossip with communication. My phone lit up with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. "Heard you're buying a house," Cousin Marie texted. "So exciting. When's the housewarming?" I didn't respond to most of them. These were the same people who'd lectured me about selfishness when I wouldn't fund Emma's art school dreams. Their sudden interest felt calculated testing whether my success might benefit them somehow. But it was the call from my parents that I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "We heard through Patricia that you're purchasing property." My mother began formally as if conducting a business transaction. "Naturally, we assumed you'd choose something closer to home." "Cincinnati is my home," I corrected. "Has been for 5 years. Don't be ridiculous. Your family is here. Emma's here. She'll need somewhere to stay when she starts teaching in the fall." The assumption hit like ice water. Of course, in their minds, my house was just another resource to be claimed my achievement, merely an opportunity for Emma's convenience. "Emma has her own apartment," I said carefully. "A cramped rental with strangers. Surely you'd want your sister to have proper accommodations. Family helps." "Family," I interrupted. "Tell me what help did family offer when I was working 3 jobs in college, when I was eating ramen for months, when you stole my identity for credit cards?" "We've been through this," my father interjected. "Dwelling on the past helps no one. We're talking about Emma's future." "No," I said quietly. "We're talking about my future, my house, my life that I built without your help and despite your interference. Emma's welcome to visit, but she won't be living with me." "You've become a very selfish person, Annika. Money has changed you." "Poverty changed me," I corrected. "Poverty you enforced while renovating your house and funding Emma's dreams. If protecting what I've earned makes me selfish, then I'll wear that label proudly." They hung up, but I felt lighter. Each conversation like this strengthened my resolve, clarified the boundaries I'd been too young and desperate to set before. Emma called an hour later. "They're furious," she said without greeting, ranting about ungrateful children and family obligations. "Are you calling to lecture me too?" "No," Her voice was firm. "I'm calling to say congratulations on your house, and to apologize for them assuming I'd mooch off you. I have my own plans, my own life. I don't need or want their version of help anymore." "They mean well," I offered half-heartedly. She laughed, bitter and knowing. "Do they, or do they mean to control well? There's a difference, and I think we both know which one applies here." We talked about her job prospects, about Marcus, who'd proposed the week before, about lives we were building, independent of parental expectations. When we hung up, I felt something shift between us. Not quite healing, not yet, but the possibility of it. Two sisters finding their way back to each other by first finding themselves. The closing day arrived with summer thunderstorms that cleared by afternoon, leaving the air fresh and electric with possibility. I sat at the gleaming conference table, signing my name, dozens of times, each signature a small declaration of independence. "Congratulations, Miss Brennan," the attorney said, sliding the keys across the table. "You're now a homeowner." The weight of those keys in my palm felt like redemption. Every exhausted shift, every skipped meal, every night spent studying by lamplight, while my body screamed for sleep, had led to this moment. I'd transformed trauma into triumph, scarcity into security. Dr. Martinez waited in the driveway with promised champagne and a small potted orchid. "For your new beginning," she said, hugging me tightly. "You've earned every bit of this." We toured the empty house together, our footsteps echoing on hardwood floors that belonged to me. In the kitchen, we toasted with champagne and coffee mugs I'd brought in my car, the only dishes I owned yet. "What's next?" she asked, studying me with the fond concern of chosen family. "Furniture shopping, I suppose. Learning to maintain a house, building something stable." "And your family?" I considered the question, looking out the window at my small backyard, imagining garden beds, and maybe a bird feeder. They'll either accept my boundaries or they won't. Either way, I'll be here in my own home, living the life I've earned. That night, I slept on an air mattress in my new bedroom boxes stacked against the walls, the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling around me. But for the first time since I was 16, I felt truly safe. No one could take this from me. No one could demand I sacrifice it for someone else's dreams. The house was more than property. It was proof that a girl who'd been deemed worthy only of sacrifice could build something beautiful and lasting. It was evidence that family could be chosen, that love could be earned through actions rather than assumed through blood, that the American dream was still possible for those willing to work themselves raw for it. Tomorrow I'd begin the process of making this house a home, but tonight I lay in my own room in my own house paid for with my own money and felt the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've saved yourself. Outside, crickets sang summer songs and I fell asleep to the sound of freedom. The furniture arrived piece by piece, each delivery truck representing another small victory. A couch that wasn't secondhand, a dining table where I could host dinners, a bed frame that didn't squeak with every movement. I spent weekends at estate sales and antique shops, finding treasures that made the house feel like home rather than just shelter. "You have an eye for this," Rachel said during a Saturday visit, admiring the vintage mirror I'd hung in the hallway. "Everything looks so intentional." "When you wait long enough for something, you know exactly what you want," I replied, adjusting a throw pillow I'd splurged on after deliberating for 3 weeks. My consulting practice grew steadily, evening and weekend clients who needed help with small business accounting, tax preparation, financial planning. The home office had become command central with filing cabinets and dual monitors, professional enough to meet clients but personal enough to remind me how far I'd come. 3 months into home ownership, I was reviewing a client's quarterly reports when my doorbell rang. Emma stood on my porch, looking smaller than I remembered holding a potted basil plant. "Housewarming gift," she said awkwardly. "I know I'm late, but I wanted to see your place." I led her through the house, watching her take in the details. She paused at the bookshelf lined with accounting texts and business guides, touched the soft throw blanket draped over my reading chair, smiled at the gallery wall of photographs from my college graduation and various work celebrations. "It's perfect," she said softly. "It's so completely you." We settled in the kitchen with coffee and caught up properly. She'd accepted a position at an elementary school in a struggling district, exactly as she'd planned. Marcus worked for a construction company specializing in affordable housing. They were saving for their own place, living frugally but happily in their small apartment. "Mom and Dad refuse to visit us," she admitted. "They say the neighborhood is beneath our family's standards, as if we ever had standards beyond appearance." "They haven't seen my house either," I offered, though I suspect that's for different reasons. We shared a knowing look. Our parents' absence had become its own form of presence, defining us by what we chose to reject rather than accept. "I need to tell you something," Emma said, setting down her mug. "They're in financial trouble, real trouble this time." My stomach clenched. "How bad?" "Dad made some risky investments, something about cryptocurrency and a sure thing from his golf buddy. They lost most of their retirement savings." Of course they did. I couldn't muster surprise. My father had always chased get-rich-quick schemes, convinced his ship would come in without the tedious work of actually building it. "They're talking about selling the house, downsizing to an apartment." Emma watched my face carefully. "I thought you should know before they call." "They won't call," I predicted. "They'll have you or Aunt Patricia or someone else deliver the message, hoping I'll offer without being asked directly. Then they can maintain their pride while taking my money." Emma winced. "You know them well." "I learned the hard way." She left with promises to bring Marcus next time, and I spent the evening anticipating the storm headed my way. Sure enough, Aunt Patricia called that night. "Your parents are facing some challenges," she began delicately. "I'm sure if you knew the situation, you'd want to help. After all they've done for you." "What exactly have they done for me, Patricia?" Silence. Then, "They raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head." The legal bare minimum, while stealing my identity, ruining my credit, and telling me I wasn't worth investing in. So again, what have they done for me? "You've become very hard, Annika. Success has changed you." Survival changed me. I corrected for the second time in recent memory, and I won't apologize for it. The calls multiplied over the following weeks. Cousins I barely knew, family friends who hadn't spoken to me in years, all with the same message wrapped in different paper. "Your parents need help. Family supports, family. Don't be selfish with your success." I changed nothing about my life. Continued working, building my client base, tending the small garden I'd planted in the backyard. The basil from Emma thrived on my kitchen windowsill, a reminder that some family connections could be healthy and reciprocal. Then came the message I'd been expecting, not from my parents, but from Emma again. "They want to visit your house this weekend. They said they want to see what you've accomplished." I read between the lines easily. They wanted to assess my assets, calculate what I could afford to give them. The house would be appraised not as my achievement, but as their potential resource. "Tell them Saturday at 2, I decided. "You and Marcus should come too." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure I want witnesses," I said honestly. Saturday arrived gray and humid, the kind of Midwest day that promised storms by evening. I'd cleaned the house thoroughly, not to impress, but to armor myself in the pride of ownership. Every surface I'd polished, every room I'd decorated, every bill I'd paid on time was a shield against whatever manipulation they'd prepared. Emma and Marcus arrived first. Marcus was exactly what she'd described, solid kind with calloused hands and an easy smile. He admired the house with genuine appreciation, asking about the renovation choices, complimenting the craftsmanship he recognized from his own work. "You two would get along," Emma told him. "You both understand building things that last." My parents arrived 15 minutes late, my mother's expression already disapproving as she surveyed the neighborhood. "It's very suburban," she pronounced as if I'd claimed to live in a mansion. "It's perfect for me," I replied, leading them inside. They toured the house like appraisers, my father checking window seals and foundation walls, my mother opening closets and cabinets with invasive curiosity. In my office, they exchanged meaningful looks at the obvious signs of my consulting practice. You're running a business from home. My father's tone suggested I was selling drugs rather than preparing tax returns. A successful one, I confirmed. We gathered in the living room, the tension thick enough to cut. Emma and Marcus sat close together on the love seat, unified in their discomfort. My parents claimed the couch like a throne, leaving me the armchair I'd specifically chosen for its position of subtle authority in the room. It's a lovely starter home. My mother began the diminutive intentional. Though I'm surprised you didn't consult us before making such a large purchase. I didn't need to consult anyone, I bought it myself. Still, my father interjected, family wisdom could have helped. For instance, did you know the market is about to tank? You've probably already lost equity. I recognize the manipulation, the attempt to make me feel foolish to position them as the experts, despite their recent catastrophic losses. The market is actually stable in this area, Marcus said quietly. We track it for our affordable housing projects. Annika made a smart buy. My parents looked at him like he'd spoken out of turn, which in their world he had. Emma's boyfriend wasn't supposed to have opinions, especially not ones that contradicted their narrative. Regardless, my mother pivoted, we're pleased to see you doing well. It makes what we need to discuss easier. Here it comes, I thought, the ask wrapped in false pride. As Emma may have mentioned, we've hit a temporary rough patch. Nothing we can't recover from, of course, but timing is challenging. My father's businessman persona emerged, the one that had failed repeatedly, but never learned humility. We're looking at this as an opportunity to restructure. Restructure, I repeated flatly. Downsize the house, liquidate some assets, streamline our lifestyle. He listed disaster-like items on a grocery list. But there's a gap between our current position and where we need to be. How much I cut through the performance. My mother bristled at my directness. It's not about money, Annika. It's about family helping through transition. How much? I repeated. They exchanged glances. 40,000 would see us through. Consider it an investment in your parents' stability. You'd get it back, of course, once we're reestablished. Emma made a small sound of disbelief. Even she hadn't known the scope of their request. $40,000. More than 2 years of my college expenses. More than they'd ever considered spending on my education or well-being. No. The word hung in the air like a judge's gavel. Simple, final, non-negotiable. No. My mother's voice pitched higher. Just no without even considering it. I considered it for exactly as long as you considered helping me through college. Which is to say not at all. We couldn't afford, my father started. You renovated the kitchen while I ate ramen. You bought Emma a car while I walked miles to work. You had money. You chose where to spend it. Now I'm choosing too. This is different, my mother insisted. We're facing homelessness. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but it was Emma who spoke. No, you're not. You're facing the consequences of bad decisions. There's a difference. The betrayal on our parents' faces would have been comical if it wasn't so sad. Their golden child, the one they'd protected and privileged, had finally seen through the facade. You've poisoned her against us, my mother accused me, filled her head with your bitterness and selfish interpretations. I told her the truth, I said simply, about the credit cards, the stolen identity, the years of being told I wasn't worth investing in. If truth feels like poison, maybe examine what you've been feeding us all these years. My father stood abruptly. We didn't come here to be lectured by ungrateful children. We're your parents. We deserve respect. Respect is earned, I replied, remaining seated. And you spent my entire childhood showing me exactly what you think I'm worth. Now you want me to hand over $40,000 I worked myself sick to earn. That's not respect. That's exploitation. If we lose the house, my mother's threat trailed off unfinished but clear. Then you'll experience a fraction of the instability you forced on me. The difference is, you'll be facing it as adults who made choices, not a child who had none. They left without goodbye, my mother's parting shot about never darkening my door again, ringing hollow. They'd never darkened it with support or love anyway. Their absence would be no different than their presence had always been conditional, transactional, ultimately irrelevant to my life. Emma and Marcus stayed helping me process the confrontation over Chinese takeout and beer. "They'll tell everyone you refuse to help," Emma warned. "The whole family will hear their version." "Let them," I said, meaning it. "Anyone who believes I owe them $40,000 after what they put me through isn't someone whose opinion matters to me." "For what it's worth," Marcus said quietly, "I think you handled that with incredible grace, more than they deserved." Emma squeezed his hand, and I saw in that gesture what I'd built with my chosen family. Dr. Martinez, Janet from work, even Rachel, who didn't understand my saving but supported it anyway. Real family showed up without price tags, celebrated your victories without calculating their cut, offered support without expecting repayment. That night after they'd gone home, I sat in my office updating client files. My phone buzzed with messages from extended family, the predictable cascade of guilt and manipulation. I deleted them unread, focusing instead on the work that had saved me, the career that had given me options, the life I'd built despite every obstacle they'd thrown in my path. The storm finally arrived near midnight, rattling windows and bending trees, but my house stood firm. I'd chosen well invested wisely, built something that could weather whatever came. Let my parents face their own storms. I'd spent enough years being their umbrella. In the morning, I'd tend my garden, meet with clients, continue building the life I deserved. But tonight, I simply sat in my home, my achievement, my proof that a girl deemed worthless could create worth from nothing but determination and spite. The thunder rolled overhead, but I wasn't afraid. I'd survived worse storms than this. Monday morning arrived with an email that made my coffee taste bitter. The sender was a law firm I didn't recognize, subject line deliberately vague, urgent matter regarding family assets. My hand steadied as I clicked open the attachment. Legal letterhead, formal language. But the message was clear: my parents had hired an attorney. They were exploring their options regarding what they called my moral and financial obligations to family welfare. I forwarded it immediately to David Martinez, Dr. Martinez's husband, who'd helped me through the credit card fraud years ago. His response came within minutes. "Can you come by the office this afternoon? Bring everything." The everything took 3 boxes. Every pay stub from age 16 onward. Bank statements showing my savings growth. The credit fraud documentation. Receipts for ramen purchases during college. A paper trail of survival that I'd kept partly from habit, partly from some instinct that I'd need proof someday. Apparently someday had arrived. David's office had expanded since I'd last visited, now occupying an entire floor of a downtown high-rise. His assistant led me to a conference room where he waited with another attorney, a woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled into an elegant bun. "Annika, this is Patricia Chen, our family law specialist," David introduced. I asked her to join us given the nature of the threat. Patricia Chen. Not Mrs. Chen from the grocery store, but the name coincidence felt like a sign. She shook my hand firmly, already scanning the letter I'd received. "Tell me about your relationship with your parents," she said without preamble. "Start from the beginning. Leave nothing out." For 2 hours, I laid out 18 years of dysfunction. The favoritism, the financial abuse, the identity theft, the educational neglect. David had heard much of it before, but Patricia took notes with the focused intensity of someone building a case. "The credit card fraud is documented," she asked. "Everything," David confirmed. "I handled that case personally. We have paper trails, credit bureau reports, even recordings of collection calls Annika received for debts she didn't create." Patricia nodded slowly. "And your sister? What's her position in this?" "Emma's supportive of me. She's discovered the truth about our parents over the past few years. She won't take their side in this." "Good." Patricia set down her pen. "Here's what they're attempting. It's called filial responsibility law. In some states, adult children can be held financially responsible for indigent parents. However, Pennsylvania's version has very specific requirements they don't come close to meeting. Relief washed through me. So they have no case. They have no legal case, she clarified. But they can still file suit, drag you through proceedings, damage your reputation, cost you money in defense. The question is, do you want to wait for them to escalate, or do you want to take preventive action? What kind of preventive action? David leaned forward. We could file a restraining order based on the financial harassment. We could pursue charges for the credit card fraud even though it's years old. We could send a cease and desist letter that makes clear any legal action will result in counterclaims. Or, Patricia added, you could do nothing and see if they're bluffing. I thought about my parents, their patterns, their entitlement that ran so deep they genuinely believed I owed them my success. They're not bluffing. When they don't get what they want, they escalate, always have. Then we recommend the cease and desist letter first. It puts them on notice documents, your position, and warns of consequences. If they persist, we move to stronger measures. How much will this cost? Old habits died hard. Patricia smiled, the first warmth she'd shown. David told me about your history. Our firm has a fund for cases like yours where financial abuse requires legal intervention. Consider it an investment in protecting what you've earned. I signed the retainer agreement with a mixture of gratitude and rage. Gratitude that good people existed willing to help without bleeding me dry. Rage that I needed legal protection from the people who should have protected me. That evening, Emma called. They got a letter from your lawyers. They're losing their minds. Are you safe? My first concern was for her proximity to their anger. I'm at Marcus's place. But Annika, they're talking about suing you for defamation now, too. They say you've spread lies about the credit cards. Good thing I have proof of the truth. This is getting so ugly. She sighed. I keep thinking about holiday dinners when we were kids. Were we ever really a family? I considered the question. You and I were sisters. We're becoming that again. But the four of us as a family, I think that was always more performance than reality. The cease and desist letter had its intended effect temporarily. My parents went quiet for a week, no doubt consulting with their attorney about options. But silence from them was like the eye of a hurricane, deceptive calm before renewed destruction. The storm broke on a Thursday. I was meeting with a client when my phone exploded with notifications. Social media tags, text messages, missed calls. My mother had taken to Facebook with a carefully crafted narrative of parental heartbreak. After sacrificing everything to raise our daughters, her post began, "We find ourselves abandoned in our time of need. Annika has chosen money over family success, over soul. We're facing homelessness while she lives in luxury, forgetting everything we've done for her." The comments were already piling up. Relatives expressing shock, family friends offering prayers, church members my parents had cultivated for exactly this kind of moment, ready to shame their prodigal daughter into compliance. But then unexpected allies emerged. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store, now retired, but still Facebook active, commented, "I remember Annika working herself to exhaustion as a teenager while you renovated your kitchen. Interesting definition of sacrifice." Dr. Martinez, who rarely used social media, wrote simply, "I've seen the receipts. The truth is documented." And then Emma, brave Emma, who'd found her voice. "Mom, stop. You spent my college fund gambling on crypto. You opened credit cards in Annika's name. This isn't about family. It's about consequences you don't want to face." The post disappeared within an hour, but screenshots had already been taken. David called almost gleeful. "This is perfect. They've put their claims in writing in public. If they proceed with any legal action, this becomes evidence of harassment and defamation on their part." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, bone-deep, soul-weary, tired of fighting for the right to exist without exploitation. That night, I sat in my garden despite the cooling October air, wondering if peace was too much to ask for. Rachel found me there, having seen the social media drama. She brought wine and righteous anger on my behalf. "I finally get it," she said, pouring generous glasses. Why you saved so obsessively, why you never splurged. You weren't just building a future, you were building a fortress. And yet they're still trying to breach the walls. But they can't, she pointed out. Look at you. Your house, your career, your savings. You've made yourself lawsuit-proof by being exactly what they never expected successful without them. We drank in companionable silence until she asked, "What happens next?" I wait. They'll either escalate or retreat. History suggests escalation, but maybe public humiliation will inspire new behavior. Monday brought my answer. Not another letter, but a phone call from David. His voice was carefully controlled. "They've actually filed," he said, "suit for financial support based on what they're calling unjust enrichment. They claim your success was built on their foundation, therefore you owe them compensation." That's insane. That's desperation. Patricia's already drafting our response. We're countersuing for the credit card fraud, harassment, and defamation. Are you prepared for this to get uglier? I thought about the 16-year-old girl who'd taken that first grocery store job, who dreamed of nothing more complex than paying for her own textbooks. She'd never imagined legal battles with her parents, public airings of private pain, the need to defend her, right to keep what she'd earned. But that girl had become this woman, sitting in her own office in her own house with resources and allies she'd cultivated through years of lonely work. The fight wasn't fair, but then nothing about my family had ever been fair. "I'm prepared," I said, meaning it. "They want to take this to court. Let's go to court. I've got 18 years of evidence and nothing left to lose." "Actually," David corrected gently, "you've got everything to protect. That's why we're going to win." After we hung up, I pulled out the boxes of documentation again. Pay stubs from teenage years, college transcripts earned despite impossible odds, bank statements showing slow but steady growth, evidence of a life built without help against active hindrance, through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that I was worth less than my sister. My phone buzzed. Emma again. "I'm so sorry I tried to talk them out of it." "Not your fault," I texted back. "Never was." "Marcus says we should come to court. Show where we stand. Would that help or hurt?" I considered it. My sister choosing sides in a battle that should never have existed, but her presence would mean something, a reversal of the dynamics our parents had created. "It would help," I admitted, "but only if you're truly comfortable." "I'm done being comfortable while you fight alone. See you in court literally this time." That night, I updated my client files, tended my houseplants, cooked a real dinner instead of stress-eating cereal. Normal activities that anchored me to the life I'd built. Let my parents drag me to court. Let them air every grievance and manufactured claim. I had something they'd never anticipated, proof that their treatment hadn't broken me. Every document in those boxes wasn't just evidence of neglect. It was testimony to resilience, determination, and the radical act of believing I deserved better. They could take me to court, but they couldn't take what I'd become in spite of them. The courthouse steps seemed steeper than they should have been. November wind cutting through my carefully chosen navy suit. David and Patricia flanked me like bodyguards carrying boxes of evidence that documented a lifetime of financial neglect and abuse. Behind us, Emma and Marcus climbed in solidarity, their presence a comfort I hadn't expected to need so badly. "Remember," Patricia said as we paused outside the courtroom doors, "let them present their case first. Every word they say is rope to hang themselves with." Inside the courtroom was smaller than television had led me to expect, more intimate, which somehow made it worse. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, a man whose expensive suit couldn't hide the desperation of taking such a case. They'd dressed for sympathy my mother in a modest dress I'd never seen before, my father in his only suit, the one he wore to Emma's events. We took our seats. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with eyes that missed nothing. The court reporter settled at her station. This was really happening. "Case number 2024 CV3847, the bailiff announced. "Brad and Diane Brennan versus Annika Brennan. Claim of unjust enrichment and failure to provide familial support." Their attorney, Mr. Fitzgerald, stood with theatrical gravity. "Your Honor, we're here because of a fundamental breakdown in family values. My clients Brad and Diane Brennan spent 18 years raising, nurturing, and providing for their daughter Annika. Now, in their time of need, she refuses to honor the most basic obligation a child has to their parents." I forced myself to breathe normally as he painted a picture I didn't recognize. Parents who sacrificed everything, who went without so their children could thrive. A daughter who took every advantage and then abandoned them the moment she found success. "My clients are facing foreclosure," he continued. "Meanwhile, their daughter owns a home, outright runs a successful business, has substantial savings. The disparity is unconscionable when you consider everything they invested in her future." David made notes, his expression neutral. Patricia radiated calm confidence. I tried to channel their professional detachment, but my hands trembled in my lap. Fitzgerald called my father first. Brad Brennan took the stand like a man convinced of his own martyrdom. "Tell us about Annika's childhood," Fitzgerald prompted. "We gave her everything we could." My father said, his voice catching with practiced emotion. "Dance lessons, art camps, every opportunity to explore her talents." I nearly laughed. He was describing Emma's childhood, not mine, but Fitzgerald moved quickly past specifics. "And her education. We always stressed its importance, made sure she had what she needed to succeed. Yet now she refuses to help with your current situation. She won't even discuss it. We're her parents, and she treats us like strangers asking for handouts. It's heartbreaking." Patricia rose for cross-examination with predatory grace. "Mr. Brennan, you mentioned dance lessons and art camps. Can you provide receipts for these expenses related to Annika?" He shifted. "Well, I don't have receipts from that long ago." "I see. Can you tell the court when Annika started working?" "I believe she was in high school." 16, correct. "And do you know why she started working at 16? Teenagers want spending money." Patricia produced a document. "This is a pay stub from Paulson's Grocery dated 2 weeks after Annika's 16th birthday. It shows 30 hours per week. That's unusual for spending money, isn't it?" She was ambitious. Was she also ambitious when she paid for her own SAT prep, her college applications, her textbooks? My father's jaw tightened. We had 2 daughters to provide for. "Ah, yes, Emma, she attended dance lessons, didn't she, and art camps. In fact, weren't all those opportunities you mentioned actually for Emma, not Annika? Both our daughters benefited from a cultured household." Patricia smiled coldly. "Speaking of benefiting, let's discuss the credit cards opened in Annika's name when she was 17. The courtroom atmosphere shifted. My father went pale. "Objection," Fitzgerald called out. "Relevance. It speaks directly to the nature of the parent-child relationship and who actually benefited from whom," Patricia responded. "I'll allow it," Judge Morrison ruled. Patricia presented the credit bureau reports, the fraud documentation, the paper trail I'd preserved for years. 3 credit cards, $8,000 in debt, all in your teenage daughter's name. Can you explain this?" "It was a misunderstanding," my father stammered. "We intended to pay them off." "Yet you didn't. Annika discovered them only when collectors called. She had to hire an attorney while in college to clear her credit. Does that sound like parents providing for their child?" The examination continued, each question stripping away the veneer of parental devotion. By the time my father left the stand, he looked smaller, older, exposed. My mother took his place, her performance more polished but equally damning under Patricia's scrutiny. "Mrs. Brennan, you've claimed financial hardship, yet courthouse records show you renovated your home extensively while Annika was in college. Can you explain spending $40,000 on renovations while your daughter ate ramen?" "Home maintenance is necessary," my mother said stiffly. "Granite countertops are necessary. A new deck, premium appliances." Patricia methodically presented bank records, contractor receipts, social media posts my mother had made bragging about her dream kitchen while I'd worked 3 jobs. Then came the moment I dreaded and anticipated in equal measure. "Your Honor," Patricia announced, We'd like to call Emma Brennan to the stand." My sister walked forward with quiet dignity, her hand briefly touching my shoulder as she passed. She'd chosen her side publicly now, and we all knew there would be consequences. "Miss Brennan." Patricia began gently. "Can you tell us about the financial support your parents provided during your childhood?" Emma's voice was steady. "I received extensive support. Private dance lessons from age 4, art camps every summer, a car for my 16th birthday, spending money whenever I asked." "And your sister?" "Annika worked, always. I thought it was normal until I got older and realized none of my friends' siblings worked that much in high school." "Did your parents explain the disparity?" Emma looked directly at our parents. "They said Annika was independent, that she preferred to earn her own way. I believed them because I was a child who didn't know better." "When did you learn the truth?" "When I was 18, Annika refused to pay for my art school tuition and I was angry. Then I found documents in Dad's office showing the credit cards he'd opened in her name. I realized she wasn't independent by choice. She was independent by necessity." My mother made a sound of protest. The judge silenced her with a look. Emma continued, tears now flowing freely. "They stole from her. Not just money, but opportunity, security, the chance to be young. And they made me complicit by accepting what should have been shared between us." When David stood for our defense presentation, the courtroom energy had completely shifted. He laid out the facts with surgical precision. Every pay stub from age 16, every college expense paid alone, every sacrifice documented in black and white. "Your Honor," he concluded, "not only does Annika Brennan owe her parents nothing, they owe her approximately $12,000 in damages from identity theft plus interest. We're prepared to file counterclaims if this baseless suit continues." Then he called me to testify. I'd prepared for this moment, but standing before the court facing my parents' angry faces, my voice still shook. "Miss Brennan." David prompted, "Tell us about your relationship with your parents." So I did. Every hungry night, every missed opportunity, every moment of realizing I was not the daughter they valued. I spoke of watching Emma receive everything while being told I wasn't worth the investment, of building my life not because of them, but in spite of them. "They're asking for $40,000. I concluded, my voice stronger now. "I've calculated what they spent on my upbringing versus Emma's. The disparity is almost exactly $40,000. They're asking me to pay for the childhood they never gave me." Fitzgerald's cross-examination was desperate grasping. He tried to paint me as bitter, vindictive, jealous of my sister. But the evidence spoke louder than his insinuations. Then came the surprise witness. Patricia called Mrs. Chen, my former grocery store manager. She'd driven 2 hours to testify this woman who'd shown me more kindness than my own mother. "I watched that girl work herself to exhaustion," Mrs. Chen testified. 30 hours a week while maintaining honor roll. She'd fall asleep standing up during inventory. When I suggested she cut back, she said she couldn't afford to. Now I understand why. The grocery store had kept employment records. Mrs. Chen had brought them all. Time cards showing a 16-year-old working every possible hour. Performance reviews praising reliability that was really desperation. A paper trail of a childhood spent in survival mode. By the time closing arguments began, the case had evaporated. Fitzgerald made weak appeals to emotion, to family bonds, to vague obligations. Patricia destroyed each argument with facts, documentation, truth. Judge Morrison retired to chambers. We waited in tense silence, my parents refusing to look at anyone, Emma crying quietly into Marcus's shoulder. 20 minutes later, the judge returned. Her expression was stern as she began speaking. "I've reviewed extensive documentation in this case. What I've seen is not a daughter abandoning her parents, but parents who systematically advantaged one child while exploiting another. The evidence of financial abuse is clear and disturbing." My mother gasped. My father's face darkened. "The plaintiff's case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm recommending the state attorney's office review the identity theft claims for potential criminal charges." The judge's voice hardened. Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, you're fortunate your daughter chose not to pursue prosecution years ago. That grace will not be extended indefinitely. She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. Miss Brennan, you owe your parents nothing. Not legally, not morally, not financially. This court recognizes the extraordinary efforts you've made to build your life despite active parental sabotage. I wish you continued success. Then the final blow, the defendants will pay all court costs and attorney fees for the plaintiff. The gavel fell with finality. My parents' attorney was already ushering them out, whispering about appeals that would never succeed. They left without looking back, without acknowledgement, without the $40,000 they'd come for. Emma hugged me in the hallway, both of us crying now. I'm sorry, she whispered, for all of it. For benefiting while you suffered, for taking so long to see the truth. You were a child, I reminded her. They were the adults. The responsibility was never yours. David and Patricia joined us, satisfaction evident despite their professional demeanor. That was decisive, Patricia noted. They won't try this again. The judge's warning about criminal charges was serious. We celebrated quietly at a nearby restaurant, the weight of years lifting with each toast. Emma and Marcus talked about their wedding plans, something small and meaningful, nothing like the elaborate productions our parents would have demanded. I promised to help however they needed and meant it. This was what family did, showed up, supported, celebrated together without calculating the cost. That night I returned to my house, my sanctuary that no one could claim or threaten. The legal victory was complete, but more than that, the emotional chains had finally broken. In that courtroom before witnesses and under oath, the truth had been spoken. My parents' mythology had crumbled under the weight of evidence. I opened a bottle of wine, the good stuff I'd always saved for special occasions that never came. This qualified. In my backyard under November stars, I raised a glass to the 16-year-old who'd started working to save herself. She'd never imagined vindication in a court of law, but she'd laid the groundwork for it with every pay stub saved, every receipt, kept every document preserved. The war was over. I'd won more than a case. I'd won the right to live without guilt, without obligation to those who'd seen me only as a resource to be mined. Most importantly, I'd won the knowledge that I'd been right all along. I deserved better. And finally, blessedly, I was free to claim it. The court-ordered financial disclosure arrived 3 weeks after our victory. My parents had fought it, claiming privacy rights, but Judge Morrison had been firm if they'd sued for support based on need. Their actual financial situation was relevant. David had pushed for the disclosure as part of our counter-argument, never expecting what it would reveal. "You need to see this," he said over the phone, his voice carrying an unusual edge. "Can you come to the office?" I arrived to find Patricia already there, documents spread across the conference table like evidence in a crime scene, which I suppose they were. "Sit," Patricia commanded gently. "This is going to be difficult." The first document was a bank statement. My parents' joint checking showed a balance that made me blink. This can't be right. They said they were facing foreclosure. "Keep reading," David suggested. Investment accounts, 3 of them totaling nearly $200,000. A savings account with another $30,000. Retirement funds they'd claimed were depleted, showing healthy 6-figure balances. "They lied," I said numbly, "about all of it." "It gets worse," Patricia warned, sliding another folder across the table. Insurance policies, life insurance on both parents, normal enough. But there was a third policy, on me. Purchased when I was 17, right around the time they'd opened the credit cards. I was the insured, but they were the beneficiaries. $1 million policy on their teenage daughter. Is this legal? My voice sounded distant, like someone else was asking. Technically, yes. Parents can insure minor children, but the timing combined with the identity theft... Patricia trailed off, letting me draw my own conclusions. The next document made bile rise in my throat. A will dated 5 years ago, shortly after I'd started making real money. Everything to Emma with a specific clause, nothing to Annika, who has already received her inheritance through the advantages we provided in childhood. Advantages? I laughed bitterly. They put it in writing, the lies they told themselves. There's one more thing, David said quietly, producing a final folder. We debated whether to show you this, but you deserve to know. Email printouts, correspondence between my parents and various financial advisors over the years. The messages painted a clear picture they'd always had money. Even during my college years when I'd survived on ramen while they claimed poverty, they'd been discussing investment strategies and tax shelters. One email dated the week of my college graduation made me push back from the table. We've decided not to attend Annika's ceremony. My mother had written to someone named Claire, apparently a family friend. If she believes we contributed nothing to her success, let her celebrate alone. Besides, Emma has a workshop that weekend, and we need to maintain our priorities. Once Annika starts earning real money, she'll come around. They always do when they realize family connections matter in business. They planned it, I whispered. My isolation, the guilt trips, all of it. They thought they were playing a long game. Patricia's expression was grim. The pattern is clear. They invested in Emma because they saw her as compliant, likely to support them. You were written off as too independent, so they tried to exploit you differently. When that failed, they assumed financial success would make you easier to manipulate. But why the life insurance? David and Patricia exchanged glances. We can't prove intent, David said carefully, but $1 million policy on a teenager who was working herself to exhaustion while simultaneously destroying her credit and increasing her stress levels. I couldn't process the implications. It was too monstrous even for them. What do I do with this? I asked finally. Whatever you need to, Patricia said. You could pursue further legal action. The emails suggest deliberate infliction of emotional distress. The insurance policy raises questions. Or you could walk away knowing the truth, but choosing peace over prosecution. I gathered the documents slowly, each paper heavier than its physical weight. Can I take these? I need to think. Copies are yours, David assured me. Take your time. There's no rush to decide anything. I drove home in a daze, the implications swirling. They'd never been poor. Every sacrifice I'd made, every hungry night, every exhausted shift had been unnecessary. They'd had the money. They'd simply chosen not to spend it on me. Emma was waiting on my porch when I arrived, Marcus beside her. One look at my face and she knew something had shifted. What did they find? She asked. I led them inside and spread the documents on my dining table, watched Emma's face cycle through the same disbelief, anger, and horror I'd experienced. Marcus cursed quietly when we reached the insurance policy. They insured you like property, Emma said, her voice hollow, like an investment that might pay out. The timing is what gets me, I said, right when they stole my identity, like they were hedging their bets. Either I'd succeed and they'd guilt me into supporting them, or... Don't, Emma interrupted. Don't even think it. Whatever they intended, you survived. You won. We sat with the ugly truth between us. Our parents weren't just selfish or misguided. They were calculating, manipulative, willing to destroy one daughter while grooming the other. The favoritism hadn't been emotional. It had been strategic. I need to tell you something, Emma said quietly. After the court case, I went through old photo albums at their house, looking for pictures of us as kids, trying to find some good memories. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to saved images. Look at these. Family photos, but something was off. Christmas mornings where Emma opened piles of presents while I sat in the background with one or two. Birthday parties that were clearly Emma's elaborate and festive, while my birthdays were marked by simple cakes and forced smiles. School events where they posed proudly with Emma's art projects while my academic awards were barely visible in the frame. I started counting, Emma continued. There are over 300 photos of me from childhood. There are 47 of you. Most of those are group shots where you happen to be included. The visual evidence of their priorities shouldn't have hurt after everything else, but it did. Being erased from the family narrative while simultaneously being expected to fund it was a special kind of cruelty. "There's something else," Emma said. "I found a journal Mom kept, from when we were kids. Do you want to know what she wrote about you?" I nodded, bracing myself. Emma's voice was steady as she read from her phone. "Annika continues to be difficult. She questions everything, wants explanations for rules that should simply be followed. We've decided to focus our resources on Emma, who appreciates what she's given. Annika will have to learn life's lessons the hard way. Perhaps struggle will teach her gratitude." "When was that written?" I asked. "You were 10. 10 years old, already written off, already designated as the family scapegoat. A child who asked too many questions, who noticed the inequity, who couldn't be molded into convenient compliance." Marcus spoke for the first time. "This is abuse, full stop. Not just financial, but emotional, psychological. The whole family system was built on exploiting you." "But I escaped," I reminded them and myself. "I built a life they can't touch." "Have you, though?" Emma challenged gently. "You're still holding their secrets, protecting them from consequences. The insurance policy alone should be investigated. The emails show deliberate cruelty. Why are you still shielding them?" It was a fair question. Old habits, maybe. Or the last vestige of hope that somewhere beneath the manipulation were parents who'd loved me just badly. But looking at the evidence spread before us, that hope finally died. "What would you do?" I asked Emma. "I'd burn it all down," she said without hesitation. "They made you collateral damage in their war against their own mediocrity. They bet against you and lost. Now they want to pretend it never happened. No, actions have consequences." We talked until midnight, weighing options, processing revelations. Marcus, ever practical, suggested a middle path document. Everything file reports where appropriate, but don't actively pursue charges unless they tried something again. Create a paper trail that would protect me while not engaging in a prolonged battle. "You've already won your freedom," he pointed out. "Don't let revenge become its own prison." Emma stayed the night in my guest room, neither of us wanting to be alone with the weight of truth. Over breakfast, she made a decision that surprised me. "I'm going no contact with them," she announced. "Not for you, though I hope it helps. For me, I can't look at them knowing what they did, what they planned, who they really are." "They'll blame me," I warned. "Let them. I'm done being their performing seal dancing for approval while they destroyed you. We're both free now. Let's act like it." 2 weeks later, I sat in a police station with David filing a report about the insurance policy. Not pressing charges, just creating official documentation. The detective's expression grew increasingly grim as he reviewed the timeline identity theft, million-dollar policy systematic financial abuse. "We'll keep this on file," he assured me. "If anything happens, if they escalate, we'll have grounds for immediate investigation." It felt like installing a security system, one last protection against people who'd proven capable of anything. Emma filed her own statement confirming the pattern of behavior, the calculated nature of our upbringing. Our parents' response was predictable, a smear campaign among extended family, painting us as ungrateful daughters who'd abandon them over money. But the truth has a way of seeping through propaganda. Relatives who'd initially sided with them began reaching out, sharing their own stories of loans, never repaid investments, that disappeared patterns of manipulation they'd dismissed until now. Aunt Patricia called one evening, her voice heavy with regret. "I should have seen it. Should have questioned why you were always working while Emma had everything. I'm sorry I participated in their guilt trips." "You didn't know," I offered, though her ignorance had been willful. "No, I didn't want to know. It was easier to believe their version than question why a child was carrying adult burdens. That's on me." One by one, the family mythology unraveled. The successful parents who'd sacrificed everything, revealed as calculated grifters who'd sacrificed only their eldest daughter. The golden child exposed as a pawn in a longer game. The black sheep recognized as the only one who'd refused to play. But the most surprising revelation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Martinez called with news that Mrs. Chen, my old grocery store manager, had reached out to her. "She's been carrying guilt for years," Dr. Martinez explained. "She knew something was wrong but didn't know how to help. She wants you to know she kept all your employment records because she suspected you might need them someday. She saw more than she let on." All those adults who'd noticed, who'd filed away evidence, who'd watched a child work herself to exhaustion while staying silent. Part of me resented their inaction, but another part understood challenging. Parents required proof, authority, willingness to get involved in messy family dynamics. At least they'd preserved the evidence that eventually set me free. I updated my will that week, leaving everything to Emma with provisions for charity. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had written me out of their will, claiming I'd already received advantages. Now I was creating the will they should have written, taking care of family, because it was right, not because it was owed. Emma and I grew closer through the wreckage of revelations. She started therapy, working through her own guilt and manipulation. I continued building my business, my life, my chosen family of colleagues and mentors who'd shown me what support actually looked like. The secrets were all exposed now. Every hidden account, every calculated cruelty, every bet they'd placed against me. They'd gambled on my failure or exploitation, never considering I might simply walk away, build something they couldn't touch, reveal their true selves in the process. The girl they'd insured like property, worked like a servant, and discarded like trash had become a woman they couldn't manipulate, intimidate, or erase. That was the real secret, the one they'd never seen coming. I was never their victim. I was their reckoning. The video appeared on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing quarterly reports for a client when my phone erupted with notifications. Emma had sent the link with a simple message: "You need to see this before it goes viral." My parents sat in their living room, the one I'd cleaned countless times as a teenager, looking directly into the camera with practiced sorrow. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while my father's arm curved protectively around her shoulders. "We never thought we'd have to do this," my mother began, her voice trembling. "But our story needs to be told. We're parents who gave everything to our daughters, only to be abandoned in our time of need." The video was professionally edited with soft lighting and gentle music underscoring their words. They painted themselves as victims of an ungrateful generation, parents who'd sacrificed careers and dreams for their children, only to face financial ruin, while their wealthy daughter hoarded resources. "We're not asking for much," my father added, his tone reasonable, paternal. "Just basic human compassion from the daughter we raised, loved, and supported for 18 years. They'd learned from their Facebook failure. This time they'd crafted their narrative, carefully omitting specifics that could be disproven while maximizing emotional impact. Comments were already pouring in, strangers offering prayers and condemnation in equal measure. "How do you want to handle this?" Emma asked when she called minutes later. "It's already at 10,000 views." I watched the number climb in real time. 11,000, 12. The algorithmic spiral had begun. "I'm not engaging," I decided. "Let them perform. The truth doesn't need staged lighting." But remaining silent proved harder than anticipated. The video spread across platforms, shared by well-meaning people who saw only elderly parents pleading for help. My business phone began ringing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. 2 clients canceled meetings, suddenly uncomfortable with the controversy. Rachel stormed into my office that afternoon, tablet in hand. "Have you seen what they're saying in the comments? People are doxing you, calling you heartless, threatening your business." She was right. The court of public opinion didn't care about evidence or context. They saw tears and gray hair and made their judgment. My Yelp reviews, previously glowing, were being bombed with 1-star ratings from people who'd never used my services but felt qualified to assess my character. "You have to respond," Rachel insisted. "This is affecting your livelihood now." That night, I sat in my home office camera position trying to find words that would convey 18 years of truth without sounding defensive. But every draft felt wrong, too detailed or too vague, too angry or too clinical. How did you compress a lifetime of financial abuse into social media-friendly sound bites? Emma arrived with Marcus and, surprisingly, Dr. Martinez. "I've been watching this unfold," my former professor said, settling into my reading chair with familiar authority. "You need strategic response, not emotional reaction." "I don't want to air family drama publicly," I protested. "They already have," Marcus pointed out. "You're just providing context." We spent hours crafting a response, not a video. I wouldn't compete on their theatrical terrain. Instead, Emma suggested something brilliant: documentation. "Post the receipts," she said simply. "Not accusations or sob stories, just facts." The thread started simply: "Since my parents have chosen to make our private matter public, here are the facts they omitted." I posted my first pay stub from age 16, then a college transcript showing my grades maintained while working full-time, the credit report showing the fraudulent accounts, bank statements proving I'd paid my own tuition, medical bills from when I'd been hospitalized for exhaustion during finals week, paid from my savings while my parents vacationed. No commentary, no emotional manipulation. Just document after document, a paper trail of survival that spoke louder than any tearful video. Emma added her own thread. "As the favored daughter in this situation, I need to speak up. Yes, I received dance lessons and art camps. Yes, I got a car and spending money. What I didn't know until recently was that it was all paid for by my sister's childhood." She posted photos she'd found me asleep over textbooks, dark circles under teenage eyes. Me in my grocery store uniform at school events, unable to change before attending. Me at graduation alone while they attended my workshop. The narrative began shifting. People who'd rushed to judgment started asking questions. Why did a 16-year-old need to work 30 hours a week? Why were there credit cards in her name? How did parents claim poverty while renovating their kitchen? But my parents escalated. A second video appeared this time with props photo albums showing happy family memories, selective images that cropped out context. They accused me of fabricating documents, of turning Emma against them, of being motivated by greed despite their modest retirement needs. "We even offered to settle this privately," my mother said to the camera. "We asked for far less than what we spent raising her, but she refused any compromise, any compassion." The comments became a battleground. Supporters and detractors waged war with keyboards dissecting every claim and counterclaim. The story spread beyond regional interest, picked up by online forums dedicated to family drama and generational conflicts. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Chen created her own video. The former grocery store manager sat in her kitchen, no staging or scripts, and spoke directly to the camera. "I don't do social media usually, but I can't watch lies spread about someone I watched grow up. Annika Brennan worked for me from age 16 to 20. That child was exhausted every single day. She fell asleep standing up during inventory. She calculated whether she could afford a $2 sandwich for dinner. She held up old scheduling logs. 30 hours a week during school, 40 during summer, perfect attendance because she couldn't afford to miss a shift. You want to know about sacrifice? Ask the 16-year-old who worked Christmas Eve while her family celebrated without her." Her video went viral faster than my parents'. The authenticity resonated. No agenda beyond truth, no carefully crafted narrative, just an elderly woman defending someone she'd watched struggle. Others began speaking up. Dr. Martinez posted about my academic achievements despite impossible odds. Janet from my firm shared how I'd worked holidays to establish myself. The judge who dismissed my parents' case while maintaining professional boundaries liked and shared Mrs. Chen's video, a subtle but powerful endorsement. My parents tried a third video, but desperation showed through the polish. They attacked Mrs. Chen as a stranger who couldn't understand family dynamics. They suggested I'd manipulated Emma, poisoned her with lies. They even hinted at legal action against those defaming them. That's when David stepped in with his own statement. "As attorney for Ms. Brennan, I can confirm all documentation posted is authentic and was verified in court. the same court that dismissed her parents' claims and suggested criminal investigation for fraud. Any claims of fabrication are demonstrably false and potentially libelous. The legal threat had its intended effect. My parents went quiet, their videos suddenly private. But the internet never forgets. Screenshots circulated, memes were made. Their tears became symbols of manipulation rather than sympathy. Local news picked up the story. Family feud goes viral, daughter's receipts, challenge parents' poverty claims. They interviewed me briefly, a remote segment where I maintained dignified calm while presenting facts. They interviewed my parents too, but without their prepared script. They fumbled, contradicted themselves, looked exactly like what they were caught. The business impact reversed. New clients reached out impressed by my measured response to crisis. People who'd experienced similar family dynamics shared their stories, finding catharsis in collective recognition. My practice grew as my reputation shifted from heartless daughter to survivor who maintains boundaries. Emma received her own share of attention, some negative from those who thought she'd betrayed family loyalty. But she handled it with grace, posting about breaking cycles and choosing truth over comfort. Her school board, initially concerned about the controversy, ultimately supported her, recognizing the courage it took to speak up. The viral storm eventually passed, as they always do, leaving changed landscapes in its wake. My parents retreated into silence, their attempt at public manipulation having backfired spectacularly. Extended family members who'd initially supported them distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with documented liars. But the most significant change was in myself. The public battle had forced me to articulate my story, to examine it from every angle, to defend my choices before millions of strangers. In doing so, I'd found my voice, not defensive or angry, but clear and unwavering. "You handled that brilliantly," Dr. Martinez told me over coffee weeks later. "You let truth speak for itself." They forced my hand, I admitted. I wanted to keep it private. "Sometimes privacy protects abusers more than victims," she observed. "Your willingness to show receipts didn't just defend you, it gave permission to everyone else carrying similar secrets." She was right. My inbox overflowed with messages from people who'd recognized their own families in mine. Adult children scapegoated for independence, siblings discovering financial favoritism, parents who'd rewritten history to avoid accountability. I'd won more than a public relations battle. I'd contributed to a larger conversation about family obligation and the price of truth. My parents had wanted to shame me into compliance. Instead, they'd created a case study in how manipulation fails when met with documentation. The video that started it all remained online comments, disabled view, count frozen at just over 1 million, a digital monument to their miscalculation. They'd thought public pressure would succeed where private guilt had failed. They'd thought wrong, because the girl they'd raised to be invisible had learned the power of being seen. The daughter they'd taught to document everything had kept every receipt. The child they'd bet against had learned to play a longer game. And in the court of public opinion, just as in actual court evidence, won. The letter arrived on a Thursday formal legal letterhead, making my stomach clench before I'd even opened it. Judge Morrison had ordered mediation, one last attempt at resolution, before my countersuit for fraud and harassment could proceed. Despite everything the legal system preferred, families find peace outside courtrooms. "You don't have to agree to this," David assured me over the phone. "We can push forward with criminal charges instead." But I found myself considering it. Not for my parents, but for myself. Maybe facing them in a controlled environment with professional mediators would provide the closure that viral videos and court battles hadn't achieved. One session. I decided. If they're genuinely willing to acknowledge what they've done, I'll listen. If not, we proceed with charges. The mediation center occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown office building, all neutral colors and conflict resolution posters. Emma insisted on coming Marcus by her side. My parents arrived with their attorney, and to my surprise, Aunt Patricia, Uncle James, and several cousins. They'd brought an audience to what should have been a private resolution. The mediator, Dr. Rebecca Thornton, surveyed the crowded conference room with barely concealed frustration. "This is typically a smaller gathering," she noted diplomatically. "Family members beyond the immediate parties can wait outside. We're here as character witnesses," Aunt Patricia announced, "to speak to what kind of parents Brad and Diane have always been." "This isn't a trial," Dr. Thornton explained patiently. "It's a conversation aimed at resolution. However, if both parties agree to additional participants, I could have refused, sent them to the waiting room, but something in me wanted them there. Let them witness what their enabling had wrought. They can stay." We arranged ourselves around the massive table like opposing armies. My parents and their supporters on one side, Emma Marcus and me on the other. David sat beside me, Patricia Chen joining by speakerphone. Dr. Thornton took her position at the head, professional calm, radiating from her posture. "Let's begin with opening statements," she suggested. "Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, would you like to share your perspective?" My father cleared his throat, shuffling papers he'd prepared. "We're here because our family has been torn apart by misunderstandings and financial disputes. We want to heal these wounds to find a way forward that honors the love we've always had for both our daughters." Love. The word sat in the air like a lie everyone could see, but no one would initially call out. "Ms. Brennan," Dr. Thornton prompted, "your response—" "I'm here because the court ordered it," I said simply. "My parents sued me for money after years of financial abuse. When that failed, they tried public humiliation. I'm willing to listen, but not to pretend this is about misunderstandings. It's about documented patterns of exploitation." My mother's face flushed. "How dare you speak about us that way in front of family? How dare you steal my identity when I was 17? I countered. "Alleged theft," their attorney interjected. Patricia Chen's voice crackled through the speaker. "Not alleged, documented, proven. Shall I read the credit bureau findings again?" Dr. Thornton raised a calming hand. "Let's focus on moving forward rather than relitigating the past. What would resolution look like for each party?" "We want our daughter back," my mother said, tears already starting. "We want to be a family again to put this ugliness behind us." "And financially," Dr. Thornton pressed gently. Silence. Then my father, "We're in a difficult position. If Annika could see her way to helping even a portion of what we originally discussed—" "So this is still about money," Emma interjected. "Even now, after everything you're here with your hand out." "You don't understand," Uncle James spoke for the first time. "Your parents are facing real hardship. Family should—" "Stop," I interrupted. "Uncle James, how much money have my parents borrowed from you over the years?" His face reddened. "That's not relevant." "It's entirely relevant. How much?" "Around 15,000, he admitted reluctantly. "But they had expenses raising 2 daughters." "Did they tell you I paid my own way through college, that Emma received everything while I got nothing? Did they mention the credit cards, the fraud, the life insurance policy they took out on me?" Murmurs rippled through the family contingent. Several cousins exchanged glances. Apparently some details had been withheld from the extended family narrative. What life insurance policy Aunt Patricia demanded. David produced the documentation. A $1 million policy on Annika, purchased when she was 17, right around the time they fraudulently opened credit cards in her name. The timing is interesting. The room erupted. Family members who'd come to support my parents suddenly had questions. Why would they insure a teenage daughter for such an amount? Why hide it? What were the implications? My parents tried damage control, talking over each other about planning for the future, protecting assets, standard financial planning. But the more they explained, the worse it sounded. Dr. Thornton struggled to regain control as accusations flew across the table. "Enough!" Emma's voice cut through the chaos. She stood trembling but determined. You want to know what kind of parents they are? Let me tell you about the childhood everyone thinks was so perfect. She pulled out a notebook, pages of preparation visible. Age 4 started dance because Mom wanted a performer. Not because I loved it, but because she needed something to brag about. Age 8. Told Annika couldn't attend my recital because someone had to work her grocery store shift. I thought it was normal that my teenage sister was never around. Emma, sweetheart. Our mother tried to interject. I'm not done, Emma continued. Age 12 overhead. Mom telling her friends that investing in me was smart because I was manageable, while Annika was difficult. Age 16. Given a car, while Annika took 3 buses to work. Told myself she chose to struggle, believed the lies because the truth was too ugly. Her voice broke. Age 18. Found out my college fund, the one they'd been promising since birth, gambled away on cryptocurrency. The same year, they demanded Annika pay my tuition from her savings. $60,000 they expected her to hand over after stealing her childhood to fund mine. Marcus put his arm around her as she sat heavily. The room had gone silent, even my parents temporarily stunned by their favored daughter's betrayal. Is this true? Cousin Marie asked quietly. All of it. They have receipts for everything, I confirmed. Pay stubs from when I was 16. College transcripts showing I worked full-time while maintaining a 4.0. Credit reports showing the fraud. Bank statements proving they had money while claiming poverty. Every lie documented. Aunt Patricia turned to my parents, her expression shifting from supportive to horrified. You told us Annika was ungrateful, that she abandoned you despite everything you sacrificed. We did sacrifice, my father insisted. Do you know how hard it is to raise children? The costs, the time, the energy? I raised 3 kids, Aunt Patricia shot back. Never stole their identities or insured them like investment properties. Never made one work to exhaustion while spoiling the other. That's not sacrifice, Brad. That's abuse. The family alliance crumbled in real time. Uncle James remembered loans never repaid. Cousins recalled holiday gatherings where I was always absent, always working. The pattern became clear once they stopped accepting the narrative they'd been fed. Dr. Thornton attempted to salvage the session. Let's return to the question of resolution. Ms. Brennan, what would you need to consider reconciliation? I'd thought about this extensively. What would it take? What could possibly repair 18 years of exploitation? Full acknowledgement of the financial abuse, I began. Repayment of the fraudulent credit card debt with interest. Dissolution of the life insurance policy. Written apology to Emma for manipulating her. And genuine therapy to address their patterns of manipulation. That's ridiculous, my mother sputtered. We're not going to grovel because you've decided to rewrite history. See, I turned to Dr. Thornton. They can't even acknowledge documented fraud. How can we move forward? Perhaps if we break this down into smaller steps, the mediator suggested. Starting with the credit cards. Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, do you acknowledge opening accounts in Annika's name? It was for family expenses, my father said defensively. Without her knowledge or consent, she was a minor. We had every right. No, Patricia Chen interrupted via speaker. You had no right. It was identity theft regardless of her age. The fact that you still can't acknowledge this shows why mediation is pointless. The session deteriorated further. Every attempt at finding middle ground crashed against my parents' inability to accept responsibility. They'd concede small points. Perhaps they'd been imperfect parents. Maybe some decisions were questionable in hindsight, but never the full truth of systematic exploitation. Emma tried one last time. Mom, Dad, I'm begging you. Just admit what you did. Apologize sincerely. Annika has built an incredible life despite everything. She doesn't need your money. She needs acknowledgement that she deserved better. She got exactly what she deserved. My mother snapped mask, finally slipping completely. Difficult children don't get rewarded. Annika fought us at every turn, questioned everything, refused to fall in line. So yes, we invested in you instead. At least you appreciated it. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Even their attorney looked uncomfortable. Several family members stood to leave, unwilling to remain associated with such naked cruelty. "There it is," I said quietly. "The truth. I was punished for being difficult, for questioning inequality, for wanting to be valued as much as my sister. And now you want that difficult child to save you from your own choices." Dr. Thornton closed her notebook. "I'm calling this session complete. It's clear that the parties are too far apart for meaningful mediation. I'll be recommending to the court that traditional legal channels are more appropriate for resolution." As we gathered our things, Aunt Patricia approached me. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for believing them, for pressuring you, for not seeing what was right in front of me." Other family members echoed her sentiments, the scales finally falling from their eyes. My parents left essentially alone, their attorney already preparing for the criminal charges that would likely follow. They'd come expecting capitulation, maybe negotiation. Instead, they'd expose themselves completely. Outside, Emma broke down completely. "Did you hear her? I was rewarded for compliance while you were punished for having a spine. How did I not see it?" "Because children aren't supposed to have to decode their parents' pathology," I reminded her. "Because you were a kid who trusted what you were told. The responsibility was never yours." David and Patricia Chen conferred about next steps, but I found myself oddly at peace. The mediation had failed in its stated purpose, but succeeded in another final confirmation that my parents were exactly who I'd known them to be. No hidden depths of love, no misguided but genuine care. Just calculated users who'd ranked their children by perceived return on investment. "What now?" Marcus asked as we stood in the parking garage. "Now we move forward with the criminal case," I decided. They had their chance at resolution. They chose to double down instead. Emma squeezed my hand. "I'll testify again, as many times as needed." We parted ways, but not before Emma said something that stayed with me. "You know what's ironic? They called you difficult because you wouldn't break. But that stubbornness they punished, it's exactly what saved you." She was right. Every trait they'd penalized, my questions, my independence, my refusal to accept less than I deserved, had been my salvation. They'd tried to break me for being unbreakable. The ultimate irony was that their abuse had only forged me stronger. The mediation had been a disaster by conventional standards. No reconciliation, no meeting of minds, no tearful healing. But sometimes, clarity is worth more than closure. Sometimes the gift is knowing exactly who people are, so you can stop hoping they'll become who they never were. My parents had shown their truth one final time. Now it was time for consequences. The criminal charges were filed on a Monday. Identity theft, fraud, harassment. David had warned me the process would be slow, that white-collar crime often took back seat to more immediate dangers. I'd made my peace with that, prepared for a long legal battle. Then Emma did something that changed everything. She started a podcast. Breaking the Golden Child launched without fanfare, just Emma at her kitchen table, with a basic microphone, talking about growing up as the favored child in an abusive family dynamic. Her first episode was raw, unedited 30 minutes of truth that hurt to hear. "I benefited from my sister's exploitation," she said directly to her audience of initially dozens. "Every dance class, every art camp, every opportunity was paid for with her childhood, and I let it happen because acknowledging it would have cost me my comfort." She interviewed experts on family scapegoating, financial abuse, sibling dynamics in dysfunctional homes. But it was the fourth episode that went viral, the life insurance policy when parents bet against their children. Emma had done her research. She'd found similar cases patterns of parents who insured children they simultaneously neglected. She'd consulted with insurance investigators, former FBI agents specializing in family fraud. The implications she laid out were chilling and methodical. "My parents insured my sister for $1 million when she was 17, Emma stated. The same year they stole her identity for credit cards. The same year they told her college was her responsibility. The same year she was working 30 hours a week while going to school. Draw your own conclusions. The podcast exploded. True crime enthusiasts picked it up, dissecting each episode for clues about our parents' intentions. Family therapists used it as a teaching tool about golden child scapegoat dynamics. Most importantly, investigators started paying attention. Detective Sarah Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen from the grocery store, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Ms. Brennan, I've been assigned to review your case. Your sister's podcast raised some questions we'd like to explore. We met at the police station where Detective Chen had assembled a timeline that made my skin crawl. The credit cards, the insurance policy, my hospitalization for exhaustion during college, even a car accident I'd had at 19 while driving to work on 3 hours of sleep, all mapped out with clinical precision. Were there other incidents? She asked carefully. Times when you felt unsafe or when accidents seemed to happen more frequently. I thought back. The food poisoning after refusing to co-sign a loan, the brake failure on my ancient car after a fight about money, the apartment break-in where nothing was stolen but my financial documents were disturbed. All things I'd written off as bad luck now viewed through a different lens. I can't prove anything, I said carefully. Let us worry about proof, Detective Chen assured me. Just tell us what happened. Meanwhile, Emma's podcast grew. She interviewed me for episode 8, our first public conversation about the full scope of our childhood. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages from people who recognized their own families, who finally had language for what they'd experienced. But it was Marcus who provided the real turning point. He'd been quietly investigating something that bothered him since the mediation. Your parents' cryptocurrency losses, he said one evening over dinner. I know people in that space. The timing seemed off, so I did some digging. He spread printed blockchain transactions across my dining table. The wallet addresses the amounts, the dates. Then he showed me something that made Emma gasp. These transfers happened after they sued you, Marcus explained. After the court-ordered financial disclosure, they moved almost 100,000 through various crypto exchanges, probably thinking it was untraceable. They hid assets during legal proceedings. I struggled to process this new level of deception. It's worse, Marcus continued. The losses they claimed never happened. They just moved money offshore, cried poverty, then tried to guilt you into replacing funds that were never lost. We took everything to Detective Chen, who brought in financial crime specialists. The investigation expanded, reaching tentacles my parents couldn't have anticipated. Their attorney withdrew from representation, claiming irreconcilable differences in legal strategy. Then came the afternoon that shifted everything into sharp focus. Emma called breathless with discovery. I found something in their house, she said. I still had a key, went to get some old photos, but I found documents. Annika, they've been planning this for years. She arrived with a box that made my hands shake. Insurance documents not just on me, but on Emma, too. Investment statements showing careful positioning. Most damning, a journal in my father's handwriting detailing their retirement strategy. One entry dated 5 years prior made bile rise in my throat. Annika continues to exceed expectations professionally. With proper pressure, she could easily support our retirement. The key is timing. Wait until she's established, but before she marries or has obligations. Emma remains the backup plan, though her earning potential is lower. May need to revisit the insurance policies if Annika proves too difficult to manage. Too difficult to manage. There it was in black ink. I wasn't a daughter. I was an investment that required management, a resource requiring optimization. The journal detailed strategies for maintaining emotional leverage, creating financial dependencies, even contingencies if I failed to cooperate. There's more, Emma said quietly. She pulled out printed emails between our parents and someone named Richard Vance. He's a family financial strategist, specializes in helping parents maximize support from adult children. They've been paying him for consultations. The emails were damning. Discussions of optimal pressure points, creating urgency through crisis, leveraging sibling dynamics for maximum return. My entire life reframed as a business strategy, my independence as a problem requiring professional intervention. Detective Chen's team descended on the evidence like archaeologists at a pristine dig site. Every document cataloged, every transaction traced, every connection mapped. What emerged was a conspiracy that stretched back over a decade. "This changes things," she told me after reviewing everything. "This isn't just fraud or harassment. This is organized, premeditated with clear documentation of intent. We're looking at potential racketeering charges." Racketeering. My parents faced RICO violations usually reserved for organized crime. Because what else would you call a systematic, documented plan to exploit your children for financial gain? The arrest happened on a Thursday. I wasn't there. The detective advised against it, but the local news covered it extensively. My parents led away in handcuffs from their suburban home neighbors, watching in shock. The house they'd claimed to be losing revealed as fully paid off one of several properties they owned through shell companies. Emma shut down the podcast, temporarily overwhelmed by the attention and the reality of our parents' crimes. But the damage to their reputation was complete. The internet never forgets, and their story had become cautionary tale about parental exploitation. Support poured in from unexpected places. A GoFundMe started by podcast listeners to help with my legal fees raised $50,000 in 3 days before I could shut it down, redirecting funds to a charity for financial abuse survivors. My business thrived as people actively sought out the accountant who survived, wanting someone who understood the value of financial independence. But the real turning point wasn't legal or financial. It was personal. I sat with Emma in my backyard on a perfect spring evening, watching the sun set over the life I'd built. We'd been going through old photos trying to salvage any genuine memories from the wreckage of revelations. "Look at this one," Emma said, showing me a picture from her 8th birthday. In the background, barely visible, I sat at the kitchen table doing homework while the party continued without me. "I remember that day," I said. "I had a calculus test the next morning, had to study." "You were 15, Emma calculated. "At 15, I was worried about which filter to use on my photos. You were planning your escape through advanced mathematics." We found more photos like that. Me in the margins at the edges, visible only when you looked for the girl who wasn't supposed to be seen. But in every image I was working, studying, reading, building the foundation for this moment. "You know what I realized?" Emma said as stars began appearing. "They bet against the wrong daughter. They thought compliance meant weakness and questions meant difficulty. But your defiance was strength, and my cooperation was just fear." "You're pretty strong now," I pointed out. "Starting that podcast, telling the truth, standing up to them." "I learned from the best," she smiled. "My difficult big sister who refused to break." That night, I updated my emergency contacts, removing the parents who'd never been safe harbors and adding the chosen family who'd actually saved me. Dr. Martinez, David, Emma, Mrs. Chen. People who'd seen my worth when those who should have been protecting me were calculating my value. The turning point hadn't been the arrests or the evidence or the public vindication. It had been the moment I stopped trying to earn love that was conditional on exploitation. The moment I realized that being difficult had saved my life. My parents had spent decades building elaborate strategies to control and profit from their children, but they'd failed to account for one critical variable, the possibility that their scapegoat would refuse to play her assigned role. They'd called me difficult, and they were right. I was difficult to manipulate, difficult to break, difficult to erase. Difficult had been my salvation, my strength, my secret weapon against their calculated cruelty. And now, finally, it was my triumph. The courtroom was different this time. Federal, not state. Formal in a way that made everyone sit straighter, speak more carefully. My parents appeared diminished in their orange jumpsuits, the calculated personas stripped away to reveal what they'd always been beneath the suburban respectability. 6 months of investigation had uncovered more than anyone anticipated. Detective Chen's team, working with federal prosecutors, had built a case that read like a financial thriller. Bank accounts in the Caymans, shell companies layered like nesting dolls, a network of family financial strategists who specialized in helping parents exploit adult children. I sat in the gallery between Emma and Dr. Martinez David and Patricia Chen in the row behind. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store had come too now in her 80s, but determined to see justice served for the exhausted teenager she'd once watched fall asleep standing up. The prosecutor, James Williams, laid out the case with methodical precision. 23 counts of fraud, 18 counts of identity theft, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, tax evasion. That alone could result in decades of imprisonment. This wasn't a family dispute, Williams told the jury. This was a criminal enterprise that happened to use family relationships as its primary weapon. The defendants systematically exploited their eldest daughter from the moment she could legally work, while grooming their younger daughter as a backup revenue source. The evidence was overwhelming. The journal entries where my father detailed exploitation strategies, the emails with Richard Vance discussing optimal extraction timelines, bank records showing my parents' true net worth, not the claimed poverty, but assets exceeding $2 million accumulated through decades of grift and strategic exploitation. Richard Vance himself had flipped testifying for the prosecution in exchange for leniency. A thin man with nervous hands, he explained the cottage industry of family wealth optimization that preyed on both elderly parents and successful children. The Brennans were ideal clients, he testified. They had one high-achieving daughter with strong earning potential and another who could be leveraged for emotional manipulation. We developed a 20-year strategy for maximizing extraction. Extraction. That's what I'd been to them. A resource for extraction like oil from the ground or gold from a mine. The clinical language somehow hurt worse than personal cruelty would have. My testimony came on day 3. I'd prepared extensively with the prosecutors, but nothing quite readied you for facing your parents across a federal courtroom. They wouldn't meet my eyes studying their hands as I recounted 18 years of systematic exploitation. Did you ever consider not testifying? Williams asked gently. They are your parents, after all. They were my parents, I corrected. Parents protect their children. These people insured me like property and plotted my exploitation before I even graduated high school. Biology doesn't excuse criminality. The defense tried various strategies. Mental health claims fell apart under psychiatric evaluation. Financial desperation was disproven by the hidden assets. Their attorney ultimately fell back on the weakest position that everything was unfortunate family dynamics rather than criminal conspiracy. Emma's testimony destroyed that narrative. She brought receipts, literally. Every dance class bill, every art camp invoice, every privileged opportunity, itemized and totaled. The final number made jury members visibly react over $400,000 spent on one daughter while the other worked herself to exhaustion for textbooks. They told me Annika chose to work. Emma testified, tears streaming, that she was independent by nature. I believed it because believing meant I could keep benefiting. But the truth is, they forced her independence by making dependence impossible. The most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source, my father's brother, Uncle Robert, whom we'd barely seen growing up. He'd been subpoenaed after investigators found wire transfers between the brothers. Brad came to me 15 years ago, he testified reluctantly. Said he needed help hiding assets from potential creditors. I assumed it was business-related. I never imagined the creditors he feared were his own daughters discovering the truth. He produced documentation of offshore accounts, property transfers, a web of financial manipulation that predated my birth. This wasn't a recent desperation move. This was generations of grift. My grandparents' estate similarly pillaged my father, learning from his parents how to extract value from family bonds. The defense's case lasted less than a day. Character witnesses who crumbled under cross-examination. Financial advisors who admitted they'd never actually seen documentation of the supposed losses. My parents themselves declined to testify, perhaps the first wise decision they'd made. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. William stood before the jury with a single photograph me at 16 in my grocery store uniform, dark circles under my eyes clutching a paycheck. "This is what exploitation looks like," he said simply. "Not bruises or scars, but exhaustion. Not dramatic abuse, but systematic theft of a childhood. The defendants didn't just steal money. They stole opportunities security, the fundamental trust between parent and child. They turned their daughter into an ATM and felt entitled to withdrawals." The defense's closing felt perfunctory, half-hearted appeals to family forgiveness and second chances. But how do you defend documented conspiracy? How do you minimize written plans to exploit your own children? The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. As the forewoman stood to deliver verdicts, I reached for Emma's hand on one side, Dr. Martinez's on the other. My chosen family surrounding me as my biological family faced justice. Guilty. The word repeated 23 times once for each federal count. My mother sobbed theatrically. My father stared straight ahead, calculating even now, probably wondering which offshore accounts had escaped detection. Judge Patricia Hawkins delivered sentences that reflected the severity of their crimes. 15 years for my father, 12 for my mother, millions in restitution, asset forfeiture that would strip them of every hidden account, every property, every gain from their decades of exploitation. "The court recognizes the particular cruelty of this case," Judge Hawkins stated. "Parents who should have been protectors became predators. They commercialized parenthood, turning their children into business ventures. Such calculated exploitation of familial trust strikes at the very foundation of society." As marshals led them away, my mother turned to me one last time. No apology, no recognition, just naked hatred for the daughter who'd refused to be consumed. My father didn't look back at all. Outside, the courthouse media waited with questions I wasn't ready to answer. But Mrs. Chen stepped forward, 83 years old and fierce as ever. "This verdict is 40 years overdue," she told the cameras. "I watched a child work herself sick while her parents lived well. Today, that child got justice. Remember her story next time you see a teenager exhausted behind a counter. Someone should be protecting them, not profiting from them." We celebrated quietly at Dr. Martinez's house, the weight of victory mixed with exhaustion from the fight. Emma and Marcus announced their engagement, planning a small wedding that would celebrate chosen family over blood relations. I promised to help however they needed, and meant it free from calculation or obligation. "How do you feel?" Dr. Martinez asked as the evening wound down. I considered the question. Relief, certainly. Vindication. But also a strange emptiness where anger had lived for so long. My parents were gone, not just physically, but legally, financially, finally. The verdict had formalized what I'd known for years. I was orphaned by choice, not chance. "Free," I said finally. "I feel free." That night, I sat in my home office, updating client files, the normal rhythm of work soothing after months of legal chaos. My phone buzzed with messages of support, interview requests, book deal inquiries I'd consider later. But for now, I focused on the simple pleasure of work chosen rather than forced success, earned rather than extracted. The legal victory was complete, but the personal one had come earlier. The moment I'd refused to hand over my down payment, the day I'd said no to funding Emma's art school, every boundary held against decades of trained compliance. The verdict simply confirmed what I'd already claimed the right to my own life. My parents would serve their sentences in different facilities, their criminal partnership finally severed. They'd have years to contemplate their choices, though I doubted they'd use the time for genuine reflection. Narcissists rarely reformed. They simply found new narratives to justify old patterns. But their patterns no longer concerned me. I had tax returns to prepare a business to run a life to live unencumbered by their expectations or exploitations. The girl they'd insured like property had become a woman they couldn't touch, protected not by their conditional love, but by her own fierce independence. The verdict was guilty, but I was finally fully innocent, cleared of false obligations, freed from manufactured guilt, validated by 12 strangers who'd seen the evidence and named it criminal. Justice served cold, perhaps, but after a lifetime of gaslighting, cold truth felt like warmth. 6 months after the verdict, life had found new rhythms. My business expanded, requiring an actual office and 2 employees. Emma's wedding planning filled our conversations with normal concerns. Flowers and catering rather than fraud and court dates. The sunrise looked different when you weren't viewing it through bars of perpetual defense. Then Marcus called on a Tuesday evening with news that stopped me cold. "Your mother's in the hospital," he said carefully. "Heart attack. She's stable, but it's serious." I felt nothing. Then guilt about feeling nothing. Then anger about the guilt. The emotional spiral was familiar territory even after years of therapy. "How do you know?" I asked. Her court-appointed advocate reached out to Emma. "Apparently she's been asking for you both." Emma arrived at my house an hour later, her face a mirror of my own confusion. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where we'd first looked at evidence of our parents' crimes, now discussing whether to visit the woman who'd orchestrated decades of exploitation. "I don't owe her anything," Emma said firmly. "The court made that clear." "No," I agreed. "But this isn't about owing. It's about deciding who we want to be." We talked until midnight, weighing obligation against self-preservation. In the end, curiosity won. We needed to see who our mother had become without our father's influence, without money to manipulate, without power to wield. The federal medical facility was 2 hours away. We drove in silence, Emma's hand occasionally reaching for mine, when the weight of what we were doing threatened to overwhelm. Walking those sterile corridors felt like entering another life, one where normal families visited sick relatives without calculating risk. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, gray in ways that had nothing to do with hair color. The designer clothes replaced by standard issue, the careful makeup absent. For the first time in my life, my mother looked vulnerable. Her eyes widened when we entered, tears immediately flowing. "You came," she whispered. "We're here for closure," I said clearly. "Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just closure." She nodded, seeming to shrink further. "I understand. I've had time to think. 6 months of nothing but time." Emma stood by the door, unwilling to come closer. I took the visitor's chair, maintaining distance even while sitting. "The doctors say I need surgery," she continued. "Triple bypass. I'm scared." "Why did you ask for us?" Emma asked bluntly. "What could you possibly want now?" Our mother was quiet for so long I wondered if she'd fallen asleep. Then, "I wanted to tell you about my mother, your grandmother, the one who died when you were young." We exchanged glances. Grandma Helen was barely a memory, a stern woman who'd visited rarely and died when I was 8. "She used to tell me I was worthless," our mother said softly, "that I'd amount to nothing, that my brother was the only one worth investing in. Sound familiar?" The parallel hit uncomfortably. "So you knew how it felt," I said, "and you did it anyway." "I thought I was being smarter," she admitted. "I invested in Emma because she was easier, more compliant. You fought everything, questioned everything, just like I had with my mother, and I hated you for it." "You hated your own daughter for being like you." Emma's voice cracked. "I hated her for being stronger than I was, for not breaking like I did. Every time Annika succeeded despite what we withheld, it reminded me that I'd failed, that I'd become my mother instead of overcoming her." The room fell silent except for monitoring equipment. This wasn't an apology. She hadn't actually said sorry. But it was an explanation, a glimpse behind the curtain of cruelty to see the broken machinery that powered it. "What about Dad?" I asked. "His family—" "Same story, different details. His father made him compete with siblings for everything. Affection, money, approval. He learned early that resources were finite and love was transactional. We found each other because we spoke the same broken language. And Richard Vance, Emma pressed. The financial strategist that wasn't generational trauma, that was calculated choice. Our mother closed her eyes. You're right. At some point, trauma became excuse, became strategy. We told ourselves we were being smart, planning for retirement. But really, we were just perpetuating what we'd learned children exist to serve parents, not the other way around. Where's Dad now? I asked, though I wasn't sure I cared. Minimum security in Ohio. We don't speak. The partnership dissolved when the money disappeared. Turns out we had nothing else. 40 years of marriage reduced to a business arrangement that couldn't survive bankruptcy. It was pathetic and predictable in equal measure. I need surgery, she said again, looking directly at me. I need an emergency contact, someone to make decisions if... No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. I'm not asking for forgiveness or money or even visits. Just someone to call if decisions need to be made. The advocate is a stranger. You're still my daughters. We're your victims, Emma corrected harshly. Your marks, your retirement plan. Don't confuse biology with relationship. But something in her desperation pierced my armor. Not forgiveness, not even sympathy, but a recognition of shared humanity. She was alone facing mortality, stripped of every tool she'd used to control others. The power dynamic had reversed so completely, it felt like vertigo. I'll be your medical contact, I heard myself say. For this surgery only. No visits, no updates unless critical. Just someone they can call if you can't make decisions yourself. Emma stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Our mother wept with what seemed like genuine relief. Why? Emma demanded as we walked back to the car. After everything? Because I can, I said simply. Because choosing limited compassion from a position of strength feels different than being forced into unlimited sacrifice from a position of weakness. She has no power over me anymore. This is my choice, my boundary, my terms. The surgery was the following week. I signed papers, spoke with doctors, made necessary decisions when she couldn't. She survived beginning a long recovery I monitored from distance. Emma remained furious at what she saw as weakness, but I felt something shifting. Months passed. She was transferred back to serve her remaining sentence. I received occasional letters I didn't open, forwarding them instead to the therapist she was required to see. Then one day, a different kind of package arrived. Inside was a small wooden box, handmade in what was clearly a prison craft program. Inside the box, wrapped in tissue, was my grandmother's wedding ring, the only valuable thing our mother had been allowed to keep, a note in shaky handwriting. This should have been yours at 18, one of many things that should have been different. I'm learning in therapy that amends aren't words but actions, and I have so few actions available. This ring was given in love, even if that love became twisted through generations. Maybe it can mean something better in your hands? I held the ring up to the light. A simple band with a small diamond, nothing fancy, but genuinely given without expectation of return. She couldn't manipulate from prison, couldn't benefit from this gesture. It was simply acknowledgement of debt that could never be repaid. Emma and I talked for hours about what to do. In the end, I had the ring reset into a pendant, wearing it not as symbol of their love, but of my own survival. A reminder that cycles can be broken, that damaged people sometimes recognize their damage too late, but recognize it nonetheless. I never visited again. When she was released to a halfway house 8 years later, we didn't reunite, but I paid for her stay in a modest assisted living facility, ensuring she had dignity in age she'd tried to steal from my youth. Not because I forgave her. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give for such calculated cruelty, but because I could choose mercy from strength where she'd chosen exploitation from fear. Emma eventually understood, even if she never agreed. You're better than they deserved, she told me at her daughter's first birthday, watching the next generation grow in safety. our childhood had never provided. No. I corrected, bouncing my niece on my knee. I'm exactly who I am because of what they did and despite what they did. They formed me in opposition to them. My compassion exists not because of their example, but as rebellion against it. The reconciliation, such as it was, wasn't what movies promised. No tearful reunions, no magical healing, no families restored. Instead, it was the quiet recognition that broken people break others, that cycles persist until someone chooses differently, that strength means deciding what battles to fight and which to simply walk away from. My mother lived another decade, our contact limited to birthday cards and necessary medical decisions. When she died, I arranged a small service, speaking briefly about the importance of breaking generational patterns. Emma chose not to attend, and I respected that choice as I hoped she respected mine. Standing at her grave, I felt the weight of completed circles. The woman who'd insured me like property had died peacefully in a facility I'd paid for. The daughter she'd tried to exploit had become successful enough to ensure her comfort without sacrificing my own. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, I suspect. But more than irony, I felt release. The last obligation, self-imposed and carefully bounded, was complete. I'd proven what she never believed, that strength and compassion could coexist, that boundaries and mercy weren't opposites, but partners, that you could acknowledge someone's humanity without excusing their inhumanity. The reconciliation hadn't healed old wounds. Those scars were mine to carry. But it had prevented new ones, ending the cycle of retribution that could have poisoned another generation. My refusal to become her had been my first victory. My choice to ensure her dignity had been my last. Walking away from that cemetery, I felt the particular lightness that comes from duty, completed without love demanded. I'd been the daughter she never deserved, but the woman I'd needed to become. And that finally was enough. 3 years after my mother's funeral, I stood before a room of 200 people, my hands steady on the podium, despite the magnitude of the moment. The banner behind me read, "The Phoenix Foundation, Rising from Financial Abuse," and every face in the audience reflected a story similar to mine. Financial abuse within families remains one of the most underreported crimes. I began my voice carrying the authority of lived experience. We don't talk about parents who steal identities, siblings used as weapons, or love weaponized for profit. Today, that silence ends. The foundation had been Emma's idea, initially born from the hundreds of messages she'd received during her podcast days. People desperate for resources, for validation, for proof they weren't crazy or ungrateful, but victimized by those who should have protected them. "We need to do something," she'd said over coffee 2 years prior. These stories, they're everywhere, hidden in shame and silence. So we did. Using the restitution money from our parents, the ultimate irony, we'd created a nonprofit offering legal aid, financial counseling, and therapeutic support for survivors of family financial abuse. Emma ran the day-to-day operations while I handled the financial structure, ensuring every dollar stretched to help as many people as possible. Marcus had designed our website featuring resources in 17 languages because exploitation knew no cultural boundaries. Dr. Martinez served on our board, bringing decades of academic credibility to our mission. Even Mrs. Chen, now in her late 80s, insisted on volunteering, reviewing applications with the same sharp eye that had once caught my exhaustion at 16. Let me tell you why this matters. I continued looking out at survivors, supporters, and skeptics alike. Because when I was 16, working 30 hours a week while my parents lived comfortably, I thought I was alone. When they stole my identity at 17, I thought it was my fault. When they demanded my house down payment after years of neglect, I almost gave it to them because family helps family, right? Murmurs of recognition rippled through the crowd. These people knew the twisted logic of exploitation disguised as love. But family doesn't help by destroying. Love doesn't demand self-destruction. And survival isn't selfish. It's necessary. I introduced our first scholarship recipient, Maria, whose parents had drained her college savings for a pyramid scheme. Then James, whose mother had opened 12 credit cards in his name. Sarah, whose inheritance had been stolen by trustees who happened to be her uncles. Each story a variation on a theme I knew too well. Emma took the stage to announce our legal clinic staffed by attorneys who understood that sometimes the greatest threat came from those who shared your DNA. She spoke eloquently about complicity and redemption, about breaking cycles and building better. My parents' theft funded my opportunities while destroying my sister's, she stated plainly. I benefited from a system I didn't create, but perpetuated through silence. This foundation is my commitment to never being silent again. The event raised $300,000, enough to fund operations for 2 years. But more than money, it raised awareness. Local news covered it. National outlets picked up the story. Suddenly, family financial abuse was being discussed on morning shows and Twitter threads. A month later, I received an unexpected call. Richard Vance, the family financial strategist who'd helped orchestrate my exploitation, was being released early for cooperation. He wanted to meet. Against Emma's protests, I agreed. We met in a public cafe, Detective Chen sitting nearby just in case. The man who'd helped plan my extraction looked older, grayer, diminished by his fall from manipulator to manipulated. I've had time to think. He began coffee untouched between us, about what I did, what I taught people to do. And I want to help, to undo some damage. I kept records of all my clients, all the strategies. With proper authorization, I could provide evidence for hundreds of cases like yours. The offer stunned me. Evidence that could help prosecute parents who'd followed his playbook's validation for victims, told they were imagining things. It was almost too good to trust. What do you want in return? I asked, knowing there had to be a catch. Nothing. He said, seeming surprised by his own answer. Maybe just the chance to do something right. Prison gave me perspective on being used by people you trusted. I'd like to help others escape what I helped create. It took months of legal negotiations, but eventually Vance's records became part of our foundation's resources. His client files read like horror stories, parents charging children rent from age 14, college funds diverted to vacations, adult children manipulated into poverty while parents prospered. Each case strengthened our ability to help others recognize and escape similar situations. The foundation grew beyond our wildest expectations. Support groups in 12 cities, online resources accessed globally, a hotline staffed by survivors who understood the particular pain of parental betrayal. What started as Emma's attempt to make amends became a movement neither of us had anticipated. My business evolved too. Half my clients now were fellow survivors rebuilding credit and finances after familial destruction. I charged sliding scales, sometimes nothing, remembering Mrs. Chen's kindness when I'd been desperate. Success meant being able to pay forward what had been given to me. You've built something amazing, Dr. Martinez observed during a board meeting. From the ashes of your childhood, you've created a phoenix that helps others rise. But the metaphor only partially fit. I hadn't risen from ashes. I'd risen despite active attempts to burn me down. And now I was ensuring others had the tools to do the same. The letters still came occasionally, from my father, whose minimum security sentence meant access to mail privileges. I'd instructed Emma to forward them unopened to the Foundation's legal team evidence for the training materials we developed about manipulation tactics. His words became teaching tools, examples of how abusers reframed history, even from prison. One letter, however, came from an unexpected source, my mother's assisted living room mate, writing after her death with a message my mother had been too proud or ashamed to send herself. She talked about you constantly, the shaky handwriting revealed. Not with anger, but with something like wonder. I tried to break her, she'd say, but she built herself instead. She kept newspaper clippings about your foundation. I thought you should know. I kept that letter not from sentiment, but as evidence of impact. Even my mother, architect of so much damage, had recognized in the end that her worst intentions had created their opposite. Her attempts to extract had taught me to build. Her conditional love had shown me the power of chosen family. Her exploitation had made me an expert in protection. The Foundation's 5-year anniversary gala drew 500 supporters. Emma's daughter, now 6, handed out programs with serious concentration. My own twins, adopted the previous year after fostering, played under the watchful eyes of their extended family godmother, Dr. Martinez, honorary grandfather David, great-aunt Mrs. Chen, holding court from her wheelchair. "You did it," Emma said during a quiet moment, watching our children play with others whose parents had broken cycles. "You took their worst and made it better." "We did it," I corrected. All of us who refused to accept that exploitation was love, who built boundaries from rubble, who chose to help rather than perpetuate harm. The keynote speaker was Judge Catherine Morrison, now retired, who'd presided over that first failed lawsuit. She spoke eloquently about justice and healing, about the courage required to stand against those who birthed you, about hope for future generations. Annika Brennan stood in my courtroom as a defendant, she recalled, her crime refusing to be exploited. Today she stands as a beacon for others trapped in similar darkness. That's not just personal victory, that's societal transformation. As applause filled the ballroom, I thought about 16-year-old me falling asleep over homework after another closing shift. She'd never imagined this safety success, the ability to transform personal pain into public good. She'd simply survived each day, saved each dollar, refused each attempt to break her spirit. "Thank you," I whispered to that exhausted girl, "for not giving up, for believing you deserved better, for working when you wanted to quit." The Foundation's mission statement hung behind the podium, "Breaking cycles, building futures, believing survivors." It encompassed everything we'd learned, that patterns could be shattered, that tomorrow didn't have to mirror yesterday, that believing someone's story could save their life. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another donation, this one from a grateful survivor who finally escaped because of your resources. These messages came daily, now proof that pain shared could become power multiplied. The new beginning wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to Maria, starting college debt-free, to James rebuilding credit after identity theft, to Sarah learning that inheritance meant more than money. It meant breaking patterns of exploitation, to every person who'd found hope in our story of refusal and rebuilding. As the gala wound down, I stood with Emma on the balcony, city lights sparkling below. Our children played inside, safe, in ways we'd never been surrounded by chosen family who celebrated rather than calculated their worth. "Mom and Dad would hate this," Emma observed. "Us together, successful, helping others escape what they perfected." "Good," I said simply. "Their hatred means we're doing something right." The stars above seemed brighter than usual, or maybe I was just finally able to see them clearly. No longer clouded by exhaustion or exploitation, by guilt or grinding survival. The view from freedom was spectacular, made better by knowing others were finding their own paths to similar vistas. My parents had bet against me and lost, but in losing, they'd inadvertently created something far more valuable than money, a legacy of resilience, a network of support, and proof that the worst intentions could inspire the best outcomes. The new beginning wasn't an ending at all. It was an ongoing story of transformation, each chapter written by another survivor who refused to accept that abuse was love, that exploitation was family, that silence was safer than truth. And in that refusal, we all found our freedom. 5 years after founding the Phoenix Foundation, I sat in my home office, the same room where I'd first dreamed of something better, preparing for the most important presentation of my life, not to donors or survivors, but to a congressional subcommittee investigating financial abuse within families. Emma sat beside me now, Director of Survivor Services, her testimony equally vital. We'd built something that caught national attention, forcing conversations about crimes too often dismissed as family matters. Today we had the chance to push for real legislative change. Ready? Emma asked, straightening her notes one final time. Ready. I confirmed, thinking of all the survivors whose stories we carried with us. The hearing room was intimidating, all mahogany and marble cameras recording every word for posterity. But I'd faced worse audiences. Parents who saw me as an ATM, relatives who preached obligation while practicing exploitation, a world that insisted family bonds excused financial crimes. Ms. Brennan, the committee chair, began, "Thank you for being here. Please tell us why federal legislation addressing familial financial abuse is necessary." I took a breath, feeling the weight of thousands of stories resting on my shoulders. When I was 16, I worked 30 hours a week while attending high school. Not for spending money or college savings, but because my parents told me I wasn't worth investing in. When I was 17, they stole my identity opening credit cards that destroyed my credit before I was even an adult. When I bought my first home at 28, they sued me for not giving them the down payment, claiming I owed them for the childhood they'd provided, a childhood spent funding my sister's opportunities through my exhaustion. The room was silent, even the usual rustling of papers stilled. My story isn't unique. Our foundation has documented over 3,000 cases of parental financial abuse. Children whose college funds were drained for parental luxuries. Adults whose identities were stolen repeatedly by those who birthed them. Elderly parents moving in with successful children, not from need but from entitlement, demanding support while hiding millions in assets. I presented our data. The average victim lost $73,000 to family exploitation. 60% developed PTSD from the combination of financial and emotional abuse. 90% were told they were selfish for protecting themselves. Emma testified about the golden child's perspective, the complicity enforced through privilege, the wake-up call that came too late for prevention, but in time for redemption. Her voice cracked, describing the moment she'd realized every opportunity had been purchased with my childhood. "We cannot legislate love," she said, "but we can legislate consequences for those who weaponize family bonds for profit. We can protect the 16-year-olds working themselves sick while their parents live well. We can validate the adults called ungrateful for refusing exploitation. We can break cycles that persist, because silence is easier than acknowledgement." Other witnesses followed. Maria, our first scholarship recipient, now a physician. James, who'd rebuilt after identity theft, becoming a cybersecurity expert helping other victims. Sarah, who'd transformed her stolen inheritance into a career, advocating for elder financial protection. Each story reinforced what Emma and I had learned: survival was possible, but it shouldn't require superhuman strength. The opposition was predictable. Family rights organizations argued government overreach. Cultural groups insisted different communities handled money differently. One senator suggested we were criminalizing traditional family support structures. Senator Sykes. I responded carefully. There's a difference between cultural practices of mutual support and calculated exploitation. When parents immigrate and children help them navigate new systems, that's family. When parents hide assets while demanding their children fund lavish lifestyles, that's fraud. Culture doesn't excuse criminality. The hearing lasted 6 hours. By the end, even skeptical committee members seemed moved. The stories were too numerous, too documented, too devastating to dismiss as family squabbles. Later in the hotel bar, Emma and I decompressed with our team. The legislation might pass or fail, but we'd spoken truth in halls of power that preferred comfortable lies. "Remember when you wouldn't give them your down payment?" Emma asked, raising her glass. "Look where that one boundary led." I thought about it often. That moment of refusal that sparked a lawsuit, exposed their fraud, led to criminal charges, inspired a podcast, birthed a foundation, and brought us to Congress. One no that changed everything. I almost gave in, I admitted. The guilt was overwhelming. Everyone said I was being selfish. "But you weren't," Dr. Martinez interjected, joining us with David. "You were being self-preserving. There's a profound difference." That night, I video called my twins, now 6, and thriving with the security I'd never known. They showed me drawings from school, babbled about playground dramas, radiated the confidence that comes from being valued rather than evaluated for profit potential. Mommy Jessa says her grandma takes her money from the tooth fairy. My daughter Lily reported seriously. That's not okay, right? You're absolutely right, I confirmed. Money given to you is yours, even from the tooth fairy. No one should take it without asking. Such simple lessons that had taken me decades to learn. But my children would know from the start, love didn't demand sacrifice. Of self-family didn't mean funding others' dreams at your expense, and boundaries weren't selfish, but necessary. A month later, the Family Financial Protection Act passed committee. Not everything we'd hoped for, but a start mandatory reporting for financial institutions when parents access adult children's accounts, criminal penalties for identity theft, regardless of family relationship resources for victims, previously told their abuse was a civil matter. The signing ceremony was small, overshadowed by larger political dramas. But for the survivors in attendance, it was monumental. Legal acknowledgement that family could commit financial crimes. Federal recognition that DNA didn't excuse theft. Validation for everyone told their exploitation was obligation. That evening, I received an unexpected call. A number I didn't recognize, a voice I hadn't heard in years. Annika. My father calling from whatever facility now housed him. I saw the news, the legislation, your testimony. I stayed silent, waiting. I wanted to say... He paused, seeming to struggle with words that didn't come naturally. You were right, about all of it. We treated you like an investment, not a daughter. I see that now. Why are you calling? I asked directly. Because I'm dying, he said simply. Pancreatic cancer. Months, maybe weeks, and I needed you to know that I know. What we did was criminal. What you built despite us is remarkable. I felt nothing, then everything, then nothing again. The cycles of grief for parents who'd never truly existed, just the shadow of what parents should be. I don't forgive you, I said finally. I can't. Too much was taken that can never be returned. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. That I finally see what we did, what I did. Emma was our golden goose, but you were the phoenix. We tried to burn you down, and you rose anyway. The call ended with nothing resolved but something completed. He died 3 weeks later. I didn't attend the service, but I sent flowers. The card read simply, "For the father you could have been." Emma and I stood together at the Foundation's 10-year anniversary, now a nationally recognized organization with chapters in every state. The testimonials wall-stretched the entire length of our headquarters, thousands of stories of survival and strength. We did something good here, Emma said softly. From all that pain, we built something that helps others. We proved them wrong, I added. They said I was worthless without their investment. But look what Worthless built. The evening's keynote speaker was unexpected. Mrs. Chen, now 93, helped to the podium by her granddaughter. Her voice was weaker, but her message crystal clear. I hired a 16-year-old girl 40 years ago, she began. Exhausted, determined, clearly carrying burdens no child should bear. I gave her a job, but she gave herself a future. Today, that girl helps thousands find similar futures. That's not just success, that's significance. As applause thundered through the auditorium, I thought about legacy. My parents had wanted to leave wealth built on their children's backs. Instead, they'd left cautionary tales and criminal records. But from their ashes, Emma and I had built something enduring hope for those still trapped resources, for those escaping validation, for those told their pain was privilege. The life lesson wasn't simple or single. It was layered like sediment each year, adding new understanding. That love conditioned on exploitation wasn't love at all. That family bonds could be chains or wings depending on who held the keys. But perhaps the deepest lesson was this. They'd tried to make me worthless by withholding worth. They'd tried to break me by denying support. They'd tried to exploit me by insisting on obligation. And in every attempt, they'd accidentally forged the exact opposite of their intentions. I became valuable by recognizing my inherent worth. I became generous by understanding the difference between giving and being taken from. The woman speaking to Congress, running a foundation, raising children in security and love. She existed not because of them, but in spite of them. And that spite transformed through years of healing into purpose, now lifted others from similar ashes. My phone buzzed with another donation notification, another survivor finding hope in shared story, another cycle broken, another phoenix rising. The twins would be home from school soon, eager to share their days secure in love that demanded nothing but their happiness. Emma's daughter would join us for dinner, the cousins growing up together in ways we'd never experienced. Chosen family would fill my table, Dr. Martinez, with her wisdom, David, with his quiet support. Mrs. Chen, if she felt strong enough, all the people who'd shown me that family meant building up, not tearing down. This was wealth my parents never imagined connection without calculation support, without strings love, without ledgers. The very things they'd mocked me for valuing above money had become the foundation for everything meaningful in my life. I looked around the auditorium at hundreds of survivors, applauding not for me, but for themselves, for their courage in facing exploitation, disguised as love for their strength, in building lives from deliberately broken foundations. Each face reflected the same truth I'd learned at 16, working until my feet ached and my eyes burned. If you've experienced financial abuse within your family, you're not alone, and it's not your fault. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. Protecting your resources isn't greed. It's wisdom. And choosing your own well-being over others' exploitation isn't wrong. It's survival. What family financial struggles have you faced? How did you find the strength to set boundaries? Have you had to choose between your success and family demands? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be the light someone else needs to find their way. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more narratives of triumph over family manipulation. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that putting themselves first isn't selfish when others have always put them last. Thank you for joining me on this journey from exploitation to empowerment. Remember, the family that truly loves you will celebrate your boundaries, not constantly try to break them. You deserve relationships that build you up, not tear you down for spare parts. Until next time, may you find the strength to rise from whatever ashes others have made of your trust, and may your phoenix flight inspire others to spread their own wings.